Welcome back to the channel. Today we will travel through the pages of What If Frame Deku Gained Powers to Change His Fate Part 6. The link to the story will be Chapter 16. Each day that passed by with no word on Kamoshida's condition added to Izuku's building anxiety. At first he thought it would be only a few days before Kamoshida might confess to his crimes. Much to his chagrin, no one had heard so much as a peep from the perverted coach. Whenever he would ask Kawakami about it, she would simply answer that they had yet to hear any change in the coach's condition. Ryuji was feeling no better than Izuku, the two hardly able to even think of anything else even when they hung out together. Working out seemed like a decent distraction at first, but it did little to work out any of either teen's apprehension. Anne was constantly absent from the group as she was continuing her visits with Shiho each day. Morgana was the only one remaining positive at this point, trying in vain to suggest that their work was not for nothing. So, hoping to give Izuku something else to think about, the feline suggested a change in setting. Do we really need to buy more medical supplies? The palace is gone now, after all. Izuku asked, looking at the cat resting on his shoulder in question. That may be so, but you still have to help me with my own goal, remember? Morgana reminded him, crossing his paws over his shoulder. When we're going to do that, we'll need more supplies. Of course, we'll wait until after Kamoshida confesses before making such an attempt, but it doesn't hurt to prepare, well we have the free time to do so, right? Right if he does confess, Izuku mumbled with some doubt, causing the cat to groan. Come on, I told you to stop thinking like that. Kamoshida is going to confess. Keep thinking positive. We did everything right. Just keep having faith. Morgana said, trying to keep the green-haired teen's hopes up. Letting it eat at you all day isn't going to get you anywhere. I guess, it's just hard not to think about it with what's at stake. Izuku said, giving Morgana a sideways frown. But back to what we were talking about, how are we going to go about helping you now that the palace is gone? We'll save that discussion for another time. I want everyone to be around when I go into the details. It's a pretty complicated subject and we might as well save the explanation for Ryuji and Anne. Ah, that makes sense. Izuku hummed, holding his chin in thought as he looked down. But with a few known details, I'm not sure how much supplies would be necessary to purchase now. Well, at everyone's current level and factoring in the destination, I would say that so long as we stay mindful, we won't run into any trouble greater than what we encountered in the castle. Should be easier, in fact. No palace ruler and no treasure to be sought out. That definitely does make it easier. We'll just buy a few painkillers and perhaps some muscle relaxers. It's a good thing the medicine Takemi-sensei makes isn't addictive. It's pretty amazing that she makes her own medicine, really. Izuku mused aloud, thinking about the amount of medicine they all consumed without any habit-forming side effects. Izuku had no doubt that it was thanks in part to her medicine that the group was able to finish their infiltration route as fast as they did. The good doctor sure knows what she's doing. It's nice to be able to get her medicine for our heists. Morgana hummed, a small but unmistakably sly smirk at the edge of his feline mouth. Who knows, maybe over time she'll even give us that medicine we heard about. Morgana-san, I already told you, Izuku sighed, earning an eye roll from the cat. Yeah. You'd rather just get regular old medicine so that you don't raise suspicion, right? I got it. Morgana huffed out, Izuku only able to laugh sheepishly in response before turning his attention back forward. I know it sounds tempting, but what we did get should work just fine. Izuku reassured, turning a corner and arriving at the shabby clinic. We were lucky to get what she gave us in the first place. I'd rather not push our luck. Okay, you've made your point. While you're at it, try to find some medicine on her list that'll help Ryuji's head. Morgana said before tucking himself back within Izuku's bag. The green-haired teen didn't bother with a retort, seeing Takemi behind her counter as he entered the clinic. Hello, Takemi-sensei. Izuku greeted, pulling the doctor's attention up to him. Sorry if I'm bothering you again. Hardly. It's not like I have people lining up to see me. Takemi dryly joked, motioning with one arm to her empty waiting room. I was wondering if you were going to come back. Did the medicine I provide come in handy? Why yes, it really did. I was able to get a lot of work done without too much hassle thanks to you. Izuku said, which was technically the truth. That's why I thought I would come back and see if I could buy a bit more. Well, I'm glad to hear it helped out. Though to be honest I thought you would be asking for something else. Takemi said, flashing him a faint smile that caused Izuku to blink in question. Alright then, go ahead to the waiting room. I'll see what I can do for you. Thank you, Takemi-sensei. Izuku said, giving a small bow of appreciation before walking into the waiting room and taking a seat in the guest chair. Morgana peeked an eye through the zipper of his school bag, curiously looking around the office. I have a feeling she knows we were listening that one time. Well, about you at least. Morgana whispered out, though Izuku quickly held a finger over his mouth. We don't know that for sure. And even if she does, I'm not going to, Izuku said in a whisper before hearing the doorknob turn, quickly adjusting himself in his seat. Alright. As with last time, here's the list of medicine I can provide. Takemi said, holding a clipboard out for Izuku to take. As he reached for it though, Takemi quickly pulled it away, causing him to blink. But first things first. I do have something I need to ask you about. She said, her expression looking stern as she suddenly turned the lock on the door behind her, resting her back against it as she stared Izuku down. The green-haired teen blinked owlishly up at Takemi, suddenly sweating bullets as he tried to grasp the situation. See crap. She definitely knows. And she locked the door. That can't be a good sign. What about, Takemi-sensei? Izuku asked shakily, his entire body trembling as he gave a fairly weak smile in a pathetic attempt to seem calm. The last time you were here, a doctor came in and talked to me just as you left. Takemi said, crossing her arms under her chest as she tilted her head to the side. You were rather lackluster when it came to eavesdropping on us if you thought no one would notice. So tell me, what exactly did you hear? Izuku sighed in defeat, knowing that lying to her was pretty much futile at this point. Scratching the back of his head, Izuku let his gaze fall to the ground. Well, just about all of it, I'm sorry. I just got really curious, is all. Takemi raised a brow, humming in response as she tapped her chin with a pen. Curiosity killed the cat, you know. Izuku could hear the faintest peep of fear from Morgana, but I guess it's natural for someone your age to be curious about it. I just suspected that the reason you would come back would be to find out about the medicine. And no, Takemi-sensei. That's not it at all. Izuku quickly dismissed, waving his arms around. From what he was saying, they just sounded like rumors. I was happy with what you gave me before and wouldn't bother you with something that's just made up. Takemi raised a brow, letting out a low hum of understanding. I see. Color me surprised as most would have assumed such rumors were true. Most walk in here because they think I'm some evil mastermind that's concocting these miracle drugs left and right. Though I suppose in this particular situation, they would be right. Izuku blinked, looking up at Takemi in shock. Really? You actually have made a drug like what the doctor mentioned? That's correct. It still needs some testing, but so far the samples I've put out have been successful. Though to be honest, I've been meaning to toss that medicine out anyways. I was a little eccentric with its creation. The other problem is that I lack a guinea pig for any further tests. Takemi trailed off, her last sentence more to herself than to Izuku. Looking back at him from the side, Takemi gave a small smirk. Would you like to get such a drug for your studies? Izuku widened his eyes at the offer, opening his mouth to reply before hesitating. His brow knitted in thought, tilting his head down and holding his chin as he began to think it over. As amazing as something like that might be, I doubt I could afford it with what money I have. Prescription drugs are never cheap. I can barely afford what drugs I've purchased so far. Getting only one would really be a waste as well, because that would mean it's only good for one use. Still, I can't help but be curious as to what benefits could be gained from such a supplement. Wow. And people say I'm a quack. Takemi giggled suddenly, dragging Izuku back to reality and causing him to fluster up. She pushed off the door and unlocked it, seeing no further reason for her interrogation. You're not wrong about the price, though. You could buy a cheap car for the cost of this drug. It might take you a while to save up money for that, even with a part-time job. Yeah, and I don't have a job either. Izuku sighed in resignation, his previously budding curiosity over Takemi's superdrug beginning to wane. Don't have a job, huh? Are you in any clubs, perhaps? Takemi asked, to which Izuku shook his head. What do you do when you're not working on exams? Or are you just constantly studying? And no, nothing like that, Izuku felt a bead of sweat trail down his brow, unsure how to answer that. He couldn't say he was invading the cognition of a perverted school coach, after all. Just studying, working out, hanging out with my friends and nothing of note. I see. Would you say you're too busy for a part-time job, then? Takemi asked further, causing Izuku to raise a brow. Well no, I guess not. I have some spare time for one here and there. Why do you ask? Takemi stared at Izuku in silence for a moment before her gaze lazily trailed to the side, as if pondering her next words carefully. Oh, why not, she muttered to herself before looking up at Izuku. Then how would you like a job here at my clinic? Izuku blinked, completely shocked by the offer to say the least. Really? You want me to work here? To be honest, I've been looking for someone around your age to help me out. But help has been hard to find, even when I've put ads up for the job. You look pretty healthy, and you say you work out on occasion, so I can assume you have a bit of stamina, at least. But before I get ahead of myself, do you think you'd be interested? Takemi asked, crossing her arms under her chest. Izuku wasn't sure how they had gotten to this point, blinking at Takemi for a moment. Looking down at his feet, Izuku started to think over the offer. It would be good to have another means of income, he supposed. And it would definitely make access to Takemi's medicine much simpler. I wouldn't be able to come in all the time, that's fine. Just come in when you feel like. I won't tie you down with a set schedule. Takemi waved off casually. What exactly would I be doing? You'll find out after you pass my own little exam. Takemi suggested, a small smirk of amusement playing on her lips. I don't want to scare you off before we even start, do I? Izuku began to sweat again, knowing that Takemi was only saying such things to scare him. Though it was very much working. Oh okay, I'll do it. He finally agreed, deciding to take the plunge and dive in. This could be fairly beneficial to their work in the metaverse, whatever Morgana might have planned for them. There were definitely benefits to accepting this position. Alright, then. Now before we get started, do you have any health problems I should know about? Allergies or heart conditions? Takemi asked, causing Izuku stare in disbelief. And no, why would you need to know that? Oh, you'll see. I'll be right back. Takemi chuckled with a bit of veiled mischief, causing Izuku to begin rethinking this newfound job. See, Izuku? I told you coming here was a good idea. Morgana whispered out from his bag, peeking his snout out. We'll see about that, I still don't know what she wants me to do, Izuku pointed out, gulping his building spit as he waited for her nervously. Takemi was back a moment later, bringing a tray of slim vials containing some unknown liquids inside. She set the tray down and lined the vials up on a stand in single file. Do you want me to drink those? Izuku asked, unsure of the idea of drinking the contents of unmarked test tubes. Takemi seemed like an okay person, but Izuku had some reservations when it came to what he put in his body. Yes and no. First I have to mix them up. To do that I use my quirk. Takemi explained, uncapping each vial before dipping her fingers in each one. Izuku widened his eyes as he saw the liquids drain, each one soaking into her fingertips like a sponge. Once they were emptied of their contents, Takemi held up her hand to show Izuku. You can call me a bit of a human sponge. The liquids I absorb only remain in the skin of my palm and fingers. A bit bizarre, isn't it? She chuckled, looking at her hand and flexing her fingers. Each liquid could be seen moving around in her fingers and palm like a water jiggling around. I can make sure to absorb the exact amount needed and mix as I please. I don't feel the effects of whatever I soak in, even if it's something like poison. I think that's about done, she muttered, holding up a measuring cup in her opposite hand before squeezing her hand gently. The now combined liquid was wrung out like a wet towel, all of its contents emptying into the beaker. All done. Now Takemi stretched her arm forward, holding the cup out for Izuku to take. Bring cup. Izuku looked down at the cup slowly before looking back up at Takemi, his eyes as wide as plates as he took the beaker in his shaky grasp. Come, now. If you're going to be working for me, you're going to have to drink obscure and unknown medicines like this. Your primary job is being a test subject, after all. Takemi explained, leaning back in her chair and crossing her legs. Is that too tough for you? But you just your hand, Izuku sputtered out almost incoherently, the implications both worrying and a bit flustering for the green-haired teen, looking between the doctor and the cup in his hand with no small amount of nervousness. There was no doubt that drinking the unknown medicine was worrying in and of itself for Izuku, but there was also the fact that Takemi had literally mixed them within her hand. Right in front of him. A very dizzying idea for the teen. My hand. Takemi repeated with a raised brow before realization dawned on her. Oh, I see. You seem like the type to have trouble with girls. I can see how this might be a bit much for you. She chuckled teasingly, her words causing Izuku's cheeks to flare up. If it's any consolation, none of my blood or actual skin touches the medicine. The pouches in my hand are different from the rest of my body. So really there's only a small taste of me in the medicine. Why did you have to word it like that? Izuku exclaimed as his face was quite literally steaming now. Takemi could only giggle as her amusement seemed to increase from his reaction. I'm sorry, but I couldn't help it. With your personality, you make it fairly easy. Takemi said, a small smirk at the edge of her peach lips. But all joking aside, this will be part of your work here. I need to know you're willing to be my test subject. Being roundabout with it won't do either of us any favors. If it's too much for you, feel free to hand me back the cup. Izuku bit his bottom lip, looking back down at the medicine in hand. There were quite a few things strange about this situation, no matter how he looked at it. Trying not to focus on the fairly forward teasing from the doctor, there was still much to be feared when it came to the medicine. He doubted that the doctor would give him something potentially fatal, but he wouldn't rule out some sort numbing medicine as a sort of joke. Go on. I'm waiting. Takemi further egged him on, not bothering to hide her amusement as she chuckled. Even so, if we're going to need her medicine in the future, it might be the best way to keep our relationship functioning. Izuku mused to himself, inhaling a deep breath as he summoned his courage. I'll do it. We're going to need this medicine. I'll thank you for the drink. With those words, Izuku quickly chugged the medicine. His eyes tightened as he tasted the sour and bitter medicine. It was definitely a bit off-putting, but it wasn't unbearable for Izuku. When he was sure that the beaker was empty, he lowered the drink and took a deep breath, trying his best to ignore the taste on his tongue. Okay, wow. Takemi mumbled, her own expression fairly stumped by his sudden bravery. You actually drank it. Color me impressed because I honestly didn't think you had the guts to do it. You're definitely braver than I thought or dumber. I would like to keep purchasing what I can from you. It's fairly important, Takemi-sensei. Izuku admitted, setting the beaker down. Do I pass the test? Takemi stared at him for a moment longer before raising a brow. I suppose you do. To have no reaction yet is a bit impressive as well. I guess you're a bit tougher than you look. Yeah, I guess. Wait, Izuku blinked, looking back up at Takemi with owlish eyes. Reaction. Badam. The most nauseating smell suddenly filled Izuku's senses. The scent was so strong that it filled all of his senses. His entire world started to spin before his eyes, his head thrown into turmoil as he was unable to think straight. It was one of the most unpleasant feelings in Izuku's life. But thankfully for him, his mind was going blank, and after a small tumble out of his chair, his vision started to go dark. As unconsciousness soon took him, he heard the doctor utter one line before fading to black. Oh, game over, I guess. The moment Izuku began to wake up, he could still feel his head spinning. Opening his eyes, he had trouble focusing his vision at first, but not for long. It started to become clear, the first thing he could see being a white ceiling above him. Finally awake. Takemi's voice echoed, causing the green-haired teen to crane his head to the right and see the doctor sitting at her desk. She was currently typing away at her computer, looking back at him in the corner of her eye. Good to have you back. And here I thought you might have actually died. What? Izuku mumbled out in shock, only for Takemi to quietly laugh. I'm kidding. Though you were definitely in a short coma after ingesting the medicine. The doctor admitted, causing the green-haired teen to stare at her nervously. You did wake up a couple times, in case you forgot. You just fell back asleep right after. I don't remember, Izuku admitted, rubbing his face as he sat up on the comforter and slouched over his knees. How long was I out? Only a couple hours. Nothing to be worried about. Takemi said, spinning in her chair to face him and crossing her legs. In case you were wondering, it was the smell of the medicine that caused you to faint. Once the liquids hit your gastric acid, it produces a foul smell similar to surströmming. The smell. Izuku repeated, some of his memory of his apparent knockout coming back. The smell was gone, but the memory of it filling his nostrils and mouth were enough to cause him to shudder, his face going pale. It was really foul. I've never smelled something that bad in my life, or had it knocked me out for that matter. Well, perhaps you could have avoided that had you not taken that drink. Takemi pointed out, her brow hardening as she sighed. Are you out of your mind? We've met only twice before this, and you just accept some strange medicine from me? Only an idiot would drink that. I just wanted to show you how serious I was. Getting the medicine really helps. Izuku explained, his gaze falling to the ground. Taking the leap of faith he made was rather reckless without full disclosure of the consequences. But if it meant being able to further support the group with the necessary medicine, Izuku was willing to take the leap. Takemi studied him for a moment, biting on the edge of her pen in thought. Fine. Whatever you say. She said, sounding only half convinced of his answer, but accepting it regardless. What matters is that, thanks to your reckless stunt, I was able to gather some valuable data. Wait, that wasn't just a joke by you? Izuku asked, blinking in mild surprise. Not at all. I needed to see what you'd be willing to do if you were going to take the job. But I also needed to test that. So I decided to kill two birds with one stone. Takemi explained, leaning forward as she jotted down some notes. That's why I waited for you to wake up. If our little experiment hasn't scared you off, you've got the job. Well, Izuku wasn't sure how he felt about getting rendered unconscious. It was his own fault for jumping in head first. Thank you, Takemi-sensei. Is there anything I need to know? Yes. I don't want my original medicines to be known by the general public. Whatever testing we do stays between the two of us. We're strictly prohibited from disclosing our tests to anyone, understood? Why yes, sensei. Good. With that said, I'll pay you for each clinical trial you partake in and, so long as you get them from me, I'll discount the medicine you purchase. Takemi said, causing Izuku to widen his eyes in shock. Really? You do that on top of paying me? Izuku asked, shocked but no less thankful. That's right. In fact, if you stick through it long enough I may even add more medicine to the list of what you can buy. But considering how stupidly brave you are, I have a feeling you will. Takemi chuckled, but offering the slightest smile of assurance. Izuku couldn't help but smile as well, bowing his head in appreciation. Thank you for the opportunity, Takemi-sensei. Don't thank me just yet. You'll have to survive through the future testing to come, after all. Takemi teased, causing Izuku to sweat a bit at the promise. But you've been full of surprises since we've met. I'm sure you're tough enough to push through. Despite the cryptic nature of her words, Izuku couldn't stop smiling. With this arrangement, he would be able to provide more medicine for the group in the future. And with the promise of even more medicine available, Izuku couldn't be happier with the results of coming here today. Smashed the darkening vision and the cracking chains in his ear pulled Izuku from his thoughts, suddenly reminding him of another advantage gained from this deal. I am thou art I, thou hast acquired a new vow. It shall become the wings of rebellion that breaketh thy chains of captivity. With the birth of the death persona, I have obtained the winds of blessing that shall lead to freedom, and new power. A card bearing the title of death appeared before him, fading away as time resumed. Izuku could only sigh, unsure how often the Arcana formations would keep materializing like this. Still, there was nothing he could complain about. In this case, Takemi was benefiting from this as much as he was. Not to mention the fact that he would still be taking such sketchy medicine in exchange. Alright, with that all settled, you can head home for the day. Takemi said, beginning to turn in her chair back to her computer. I look forward to continue working together, my little guinea pig. She said, giving him a sideways smirk before chuckling. Gee, guinea pig, Izuku exclaimed, the word reminding him of a certain eccentric QA engineer. Despite the temporary coma that he had been put in, Izuku wasn't feeling too bad after leaving Takemi's clinic. If he didn't have to be home by a specific time, he'd likely be willing to go out and do something. Maybe if Sakura-san lets me, I can go out for a jog, he muttered, holding his chin as he looked down in thought. You could always just do some muscle training. But I can see how you'd feel pretty limited in that room. You don't have any workout equipment aside from those dumbbells. Morgana hummed in thought. As they rounded the corner toward home, Morgana made sure to stuff himself away into his bag. Pushing open the door leading inside the cafe, Izuku was mildly surprised to see a now slouching Sojiro leaning on the edge of his bar, weariness evident in his posture and movement. He looked up at Izuku, his face both tired and thankful. Goodness, I thought you were another customer, Sojiro muttered, pushing up from the counter and sighing. I am just about ready to call it a day, and it's not even closing time. Are you okay, Sakura-san? You look tired. Izuku asked curiously, having yet to see the coffee shop owner in such a state. Did something happen? Nothing bad, technically. I just had a strange flux in customers today happen all at once. Sojiro admitted, bending backward and stretching his spine with a satisfying crack. It's happened before, but it's not common enough that I'm prepared. Guess I've gotten a little too used to the complacency that this shop is used to seeing. Rolling his neck, Sojiro let out a yawn. Mind watching the shop for me for a quick sec? I'm gonna go get some smokes from the corner store. I'll make sure to set it to closed until I get back. Oh, no problem, Sakura-san. I can do that for you. Izuku agreed, setting his bag gently down on one of the stools by the bar. Thanks. I won't be long, so just keep an eye out. Sojiro nodded in appreciation, moving around the bar and heading out the door. Izuku moved to the inside of the bar, taking a good look around as he leaned against the wood. It's strange, but this bar is actually kind of comfortable to stand in. It is a cozy little place. I can see how the boss would prefer to have a quiet crowd rather than a bunch of people taking up the entire shop. Morgana said, popping out of the bag and looking around. Izuku took a small look around, his eyes grazing over the kitchen. Looking at the sink, he could see a stack of cups and plates inside, pushing off the bar and moving into the kitchen. Wow, he really was busy today. I haven't seen so many dishes stacked up in here before. Do you know how to make coffee? I've been pretty curious about tasting it since I've started living here. Morgana asked curiously, watching as Izuku rolled up his sleeves. Not with the equipment Sakura-san has. His looks more professional than anything I've ever worked. Izuku said, giving an apologetic smile to the cat. He grabbed an apron from the counter and wrapped it around his waist. Would you mind letting me know if Sakura-san arrives? I'm going to wash some of these for him. That's awful kind of you. Trying to get some points with the boss. Morgana smiled, his tail wagging back and forth. Nothing like that. He just seems tired enough, so I'm sure he doesn't want to do these on top of everything. Izuku dismissed, grabbing a sponge and a bottle of soap and filling the sink with water to soak the dishes in. He was kind enough to take me in and gave me the chance to keep going to school. It's the least I can do for him. I guess that doesn't surprise me. You're that kind of person, after all. Morgana chuckled, crossing his paws under him as he watched the green-haired teen start cleaning. In other news, heroes begin to watch the trains for any suspicious activity after several unexplained crashes. Morgana's ears perked up, eyes glancing up at the television hanging in the corner of the bar. Izuku continued to wash the dishes, but he tilted his head ever so slightly to the side to listen better. The train drivers experienced some unexplained mental breakdowns in the middle of their shifts, causing the trains to crash with great property damage and injury to many of those on board or in the station. It's still undetermined whether it was the cause of some quirk or mere happenstance. I've been hearing about that everywhere. I hope no one was too seriously hurt, Izuku murmured from the kitchen, focusing back on the dishes in hand. It's a miracle no one's been killed so far. There's definitely something suspicious about the number of occurrences and the mental breakdowns that each driver suffers while at the wheel. It would probably make a great target for the Phantom Thieves of Hearts, don't you think? That's if someone is really behind it. Though the chances are pretty high. But with all the attention going to it, I'm sure the heroes will figure it out. Izuku suggested hopefully, putting each dish in the drying rack. At least they're reliable with the things that they can't ignore, Morgana offhandedly remarked, causing Izuku to pause. I know that they've been absent in the case with Kamoshida, but it's not their fault, Morgana-san. A lot of things factored into it, Izuku rebutted, feeling a bit defensive over the statement. I'm sure there are, but because of their absence, we were forced to take the route we did. We had to step up when no one else would for the students under Kamoshida. Morgana reasoned, causing Izuku to shift uncomfortably. I know, but heroes still do a lot of good. But they can't be everywhere, Morgana-san. And they don't know every terrible thing done in the world. Izuku said, causing Morgana to hum. I suppose so. But perhaps that can be our objective from here on. Morgana declared, causing Izuku to blink and turn back to him. If they are the heroes of the scene, we can be the heroes of the unseen. What do you mean? Izuku asked curiously, but before Morgana could give him an answer, the front bell of the coffee shop rang. The cat quickly ducked back into the bag, and Izuku peeked his head out of the kitchen to see who it was. As expected, Sojiro walked in with a lit cigarette in his mouth. Oh, hey Sakura-san. Just give me a minute, I'm halfway through. Gotcha, I appreciate. Wait, what? Sojiro blinked, walking around the bar to look inside the kitchen. You're doing the dishes. You looked like you had a tough day, so I thought I would chip in. I hope you don't mind. Izuku explained, shooting him a small smile before focusing back on the dishes. Sojiro watched him for a moment, as if in a state of disbelief, though Izuku couldn't imagine why. Well, if you feel so inclined, go right ahead. I appreciate it, kid. Sojiro slowly said, moving to the inside of the bar and working on the smoke in his hand. Let me know when you're done and I'll take a look at your work. I have to make sure they're clean thoroughly, okay? Understood. Izuku continued from there, making sure to be as thorough as needed be. It didn't take long for him to finish up, untying his apron and ushering Sojiro to come and check the dishes for himself. Not bad at all. You did a good job. Sojiro admitted, flashing Izuku a faint smile. It might not seem like a lot of work, but it certainly took a load off my back. Thanks for the help. I don't mind helping when I can. Just ask me if you need something, Sakura-san. Izuku said, reaching over and grabbing his book bag, preparing to go back up the stairs. I might have to take you up on that offer, kid. Sojiro chuckled, putting out his cigarette as he spoke. How are things going at school? Oh, just fine, still trying to fit in, I guess, Izuku mumbled sheepishly, unsure if informing him of his current situation was the best idea. It definitely didn't seem like something the coffee shop owner wanted to hear about. Good. So long as things go without too much noise with you, I won't complain. Sojiro said, crossing his arms over his chest. Just keep from making any reckless heroics again, and we should be fine. But as things stand, I'm a pretty busy man. I have to report to your parole officer twice a month, manage the shop and some personal concerns to worry about of my own. So having you pitch in with the dishes or perhaps cleaning the floor would certainly make it easier on me. I can help out more if you'd like. In fact, do you want me to clean anything else right now? Izuku asked, eyes glazing over the tables of the shop. Not right now, but thanks. You doing the dishes was good enough for today. Sojiro reassured, giving him a small smile. I know that you're going to be busy with a few of your own things as the school year goes on, so I won't ask you to do some work every day. But what little you can do would definitely help. Of course I won't ask you to do this for free, though I can't rightly pay you, don't worry about that, Sakura-san, nonsense. You might be well-meaning, kid, but don't let yourself get conned by others into doing stuff for free all the time. People will abuse that kindness until you've rightly run out. Sojiro cut him off, shaking his head. I know you might feel some obligation to help since I took you in, but I get paid for it by the state. It's not like I'm getting nothing out of the deal. So in exchange for what help you can give me, how about Sojiro looked around the shop before an idea suddenly came to him, smiling confidently. Then I'll teach you how to make the perfect cup of coffee. Not a bad deal, eh? Izuku opened his mouth, tempted to offer without such a payment before stopping himself. Sojiro had made it clear he would rather give him something over nothing and would likely not take no for an answer. Sparing a glance at the curious beakers that Sojiro brewed his coffee in, Izuku returned his smile. Okay. I'll try to learn what I can from you, Sakura-san. Izuku said, reaching a hand out to shake. Alright, then. We have a deal. Sojiro chuckled, reaching out and taking Izuku's hand into a firm shake. Smash. Izuku released a breath, half expecting the link to be formed this time. I am thou art I. Thou hast acquired a new vow. It shall become the wings of rebellion that breaketh thy chains of captivity. With the birth of the Hierophant persona, I have obtained the winds of blessing that shall lead to freedom and new power. Izuku watched as a new card materialized before his eyes, but paid it little mind. With this new bond formed, the green-haired teen was beginning to understand what the requirements were to have a confidant link established. Igor and the twins' words were beginning to make more sense. So it starts with something mutually beneficial, but its development into something more is what is more personal. You alright? You look a bit dazed. Sojiro asked, raising a brow curiously and bringing Izuku back from his mess of thoughts. Oh, it's nothing. I'm gonna head to bed, Sakura-san. I'll see you later. Izuku quickly said, excusing himself and leaving the shopkeeper to his work. Sure, see you later. Was his response, Sojiro simply shrugging off his odd behavior. Izuku marched up the stairs and headed straight for his bed, gently setting down his school bag next to him as he sat down. Morgana popped his head out, beginning to climb out of the bag and take a seat. Freedom. I'm getting used to staying in the bag for so long, but nothing beats being able to stretch out. Morgana chuckled, stretching his forepaws forward on the bed before looking back up at Izuku. The green-haired teen seemed to be deep in thought, causing the cat to tilt his head. Something bothering you? Or is it the usual Kamoshida anxiety? Oh, no, not that. Izuku wasn't sure how to describe it. These relationships that he had established were not purely for the benefit of their confidant link. That was never even at the forefront of his mind until the strange oath echoed in his ears. But with their establishment, it made Izuku feel like he was just using those he had forged a link with. This, coupled with the fact that he had so few people he could call his friends in the past, was making him overthink it all. His experience with others outside of his mother, Mikoto and Katsuki was fairly limited. So all of these different links being established so closely was becoming another source of anxiety. Am I making real relationships with those around me? Izuku muttered out, unable to find any other way to describe the question scratching at his brain currently. Of course you are. Why wouldn't they be real? Morgana asked in confusion, causing the green-haired teen to breath out. I don't know, it's nothing. Izuku sighed, unsure if explaining the confidant links right now was the right thing to do. He wanted to tell the others about it as well. Look, the deal with the doctor and the boss aren't out of sole benefit to you. It's a mutual benefit. Morgana reminded him, his tail wagging behind him as he spoke. You're a smart guy, Izuku, but you definitely overthink things sometimes. Ryuji and Anne look to you because they trust you. Because we all know that you're genuinely concerned and kind. Whatever doubts you have about the friends around you, you need to shut them out. Heck, sometimes friendships start out with mutually beneficial deals, don't you think? You think so? Izuku muttered, looking back down at the cat in thought. Of course. If you want an example, me and you fit the mold perfectly. Sure, I started our partnership purely for the advantage of gaining another Persona user in my quest. But at this point, I can hardly call you just a partner. I think it's safe to say we're friends at this point, right? Morgana asked, causing Izuku's expression to brighten as he looked down at the cat. Morgana-san, of course, our deal is still in place and I plan to benefit from your help, but that doesn't mean we're not friends. Morgana chuckled, somewhat shattering the image of kindness he had painted with his words for Izuku. Still, the green-haired teen was touched by his words, thankful for the cat's reassurance. You're right. I do overthink a lot of things. I'll try to get rid of any future doubt. Izuku declared, flashing a grateful smile at the cat. Thank you, Morgana-san. No problem. Now be a pal and get me some milk and tuna, would you? Izuku almost fell flat on his face from the request, but merely gave a sheepish laugh before doing as the cat asked. Geez, over a week now and still nothing on Kamoshida. Ryuji complained, yawning loudly as he walked in line with Izuku to school. Today was supposed to be when he was going to expel us, too. At least it isn't happening as far as we can tell, but it's about to be a week-long break. Which means if he does decide to confess, we won't know until we're back from break. Izuku hummed, rubbing his right arm anxiously. How the hell are we gonna even enjoy the break if we're worrying about it? Damn it, this effing sucks, Ryuji grumbled bitterly, slouching over as he walked. Hey, guys. The two heard Anne call out to them, both boys turning back to see the platinum blonde approach. She quickly stepped in line on Izuku's left, now matching their pace. What are you talking about? Oh, the usual depressing crap. Just how silent that bastard Kamoshida has been since we took him down. Ryuji said, causing Ann to chuckle. I honestly think you guys are worrying too much. I decided to stop worrying and keep believing. Ann declared, causing the two teens to perk up in surprise. See? At least Lady Ann is having faith. Morgana said, his voice muffled through the bag's zipper. There were too many students around for him to poke his head out. You've been in a pretty good mood every time we see ya. Ryuji commented, showing a bit of surprise in his voice. It's been that way since Uzui-senpai woke up, right? How is she doing? Izuku asked with a small smile. I'll admit, it's been rough on her. Recovery girl has been there almost every day for a checkup. She's still pretty down, but she's pushing through. Ann said, looking forward as they approached the school. I'm just happy to see her up and alive. Once recovery girl is satisfied, she'll be ready to move again. That's good to hear. I'm glad that bastard couldn't take her away from you. Ryuji suggested, giving Ann an encouraging grin. Let her know we're all hoping she's back on her feet soon. I will, thanks. Maybe when the time is right, we can all do something with her together. Ann suggested, earning nods of acceptance from Izuku and Ryuji. I don't see it happening very soon, but I'll try to have her keep an open mind. The three turned through the front gates, climbing the stairs and approaching the main hall. As they opened the doors though, they could see a crowd of students being herded together, causing them to blink in confusion. The hell's going on? Ryuji asked, only for Izuku and Ann to remain silent, both equally oblivious. Hey, you three. Get moving. They turned to see Kawakami approaching them, the tired-looking teacher waving for them to move forward. The first half of first period is going to replaced by a morning assembly. Please head to the gymnasium with the other students. What's the assembly for, sensei? Izuku asked, turning to Kawakami in question. Not sure. Though if I had to hazard a guess, it's likely related to what happened with Suzui. Kawakami explained, releasing a tired sigh. I'm sure it's strange to have to do this on the day before break, but the principal wants to keep student morale up. Just bear with it so you can all go on with your day, okay? With that, Kawakami walked past them, calling out for students at the entrance to head to the gymnasium. TCH. An assembly to keep morale up. I bet the principal thinks something like this can help him clear his conscience for not doing shit. Ryuji huffed out in contempt. Forget it, Ryuji. They were bound to do this after what happened. I hate it too, but like Kawakami said, just grin and bear with it. Ann sighed, her mood suddenly soured by the idea of attending an assembly like that. Izuku remained silent, no less enthused than either of his friends about attending the assembly than either of them. Following the crowd to the gymnasium, the three stuck together as they found a spot to stand. The assembly was truly a last-minute decision, as there weren't even seats for any of the students to sit. The three remained silent, having nothing to say as they waited for the assembly to start and end. Do they really need this? I get it, a girl just jumped off the roof, but it's not like they need to have some big talk about it. Not like it would do any good. A random student commented with a huff, causing Ann to wince slightly. Izuku and Ryuji shot her a concerned glance, but she merely shook her head, signaling that she'd make it through just fine. Izuku didn't bother her any further, deciding to glance around the gymnasium for nothing in particular to kill time. Some ways away, he spotted Miss Hima with his head tilted down miserably. It seems he was in no mood to enjoy the assembly any more than they were. Izuku moved on from the average-looking teen, continuing to look around before his eyes landed on a certain brunette. His eyes lit up somewhat, swallowing a lump in his throat. It had been some time since they last talked. Makoto had been avoiding him since their previous talk, obviously upset at being kept in the dark for so long. Izuku couldn't blame her, part of him regretting the fact that he had in the first place. Maybe I have waited too long to tell her. Her gaze seemed to move around the gymnasium as well, the third year likely no more thrilled than he was. Before he knew it, their gazes met, causing Izuku to visibly fidget in place. Raising a hand, Izuku shakily waved at the third year, hoping for some sign that maybe she was now over it. That hope was immediately dashed when Makoto narrowed her eyes, quickly turning her head away from him and closing her eyes. The green-haired teen's shoulders slumped in depression, his gaze cast to the ground. Pretty rough, man. But I'm sure she'll get over it. Ryuji chuckled, reaching over and gripping his shoulder in reassurance. So long as you tell her the truth. Any less and I have no doubt she'll feel inclined to ignore you. Ann added in thought, not thinking before she spoke. Thanks guys, Izuku muttered, their words hardly doing anything to reassure him. Attention, everyone. Attention. Today's morning assembly is now underway. The Bayakawa announced from the stage, tapping on his microphone to grab the students' attention. Slowly the students began to quiet down, allowing for the principal to speak. Thank you. I know that the past few weeks have been a bit strange for us all, but I wanted to bring you all here to give you some encouragement. You wouldn't need this shit if you did something. Ryuji growled bitterly under his breath, and nudging him to make sure he wouldn't keep talking. In fact, I bring good news regarding Shiho Suzui. Thanks to her strength of heart and to the hard work of Rescue Hero Recovery Girl, Suzui-san is on her way to making a full recovery. Kobayakawa announced, spurning a small bit of chatter and cheer among the crowd of students. Anne was at least thankful for some of the support she heard from the students around them. But let us not forget the tragedy that could have ended much worse. With Suzui-san's survival, I implore you all to keep your heads up, and SKREE. The principal paused for a moment, heads turning to the side as the gymnasium entrance opened suddenly and very loudly. Tilting their heads to the side, Izuku, Ryuji and Anne immediately inhaled a breath. At the entrance of the gym, none other than Suguru Kamoshida stood there. His expression was tired and depressed, bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. Kamoshida-san. What are you doing here? Kobayakawa asked, almost as if forgetting that he was still speaking on the mic. I've come to terms with what I am. Kamoshida declared, slowly looking up at the crowd of students. And in doing so, I have decided to admit to my crimes. To every single one of you. Murmurs of confusion erupted through the gymnasium, though the three phantom thieves responsible could only watch him in disbelief. To see him here after waiting for so long felt like a strange dream. They spared one another a glance before quickly following his movements toward the stage. Anne blinked, a thought suddenly occurring to her. She fished her phone from her pocket, quickly searching through her contacts. What are you doing? Ryuji asked in a whisper, eyes darting back and forth between Anne and Kamoshida. If this bastard is doing what I think, then there's someone who needs to see this above anyone else. Anne declared, quickly tapping the number on her phone and activating her video chat. Izuku and Ryuji immediately knew who she was referring to, watching her screen as they waited for an answer. Anne. Is that you? Shiho's tired voice yawned through the speaker of Anne's phone. Izuku and Ryuji couldn't see much, but they could see she was still in a hospital bed. Why are you calling me so shh? Anne hushed her, putting a finger to her lips. Shiho blinked on the other end in confusion but waited patiently. Tapping on the settings of her phone, the view of Anne's phone flipped, switching from facing her to facing forward, now showing Shiho Kamoshida on stage. The brunette gasped in disbelief, her body tensing as she saw him. But much to her confusion, she couldn't help but wonder. Why was Kamoshida on his knees? Before a crowd of students no less. I've done terrible things to many different students. All for my own sick personal enjoyment, Kamoshida declared, gasps of shock sounding through the crowd as murmurs of confusion began to pick up. Shiho remained silent, but her eyes could be seen widening in disbelief ever so slowly. Verbally and physically abusing students both on and off my volleyball team, sexually harassing female students who couldn't fight back, his voice started to crack, his words trembling as he spoke. I even sexually assaulted a student, much to my shame. It's because of me that Shiho Suzui tried to kill herself. The murmurs rose in volume, sounds of shock and disgust echoing through the gymnasium. Izuku could hardly believe his ears. When Morgana said that Kamoshida would confess to his sins, he hadn't realized to what extent he meant. Hearing and seeing the perverted coach now, it was almost like something he could only imagine happening. Heck, even a quirk with mental manipulation could never be so accurate. At least as far as any recorded quirks had gone. He spared a glance at Makoto to see her reaction. Much like he was, she could only stare at Kamoshida in disbelief, her jaw slack as she processed exactly what was happening on stage. I had made this school into my place to rule. The only students willing to stand up to me, I promised to expel. But of course I won't pursue such selfish thoughts. Kamoshida continued, Ryuji and Izuku immediately feeling a small sense of relief overcome them. Though at this point, any expulsion put forth by Kamoshida would mean nothing either way. I'm so sorry for the terrible things I've put students through. I'm a cruel, shallow and a hateful man. No, I'm worse than that. I'm not a man. I'm just scum. Kamoshida broke down, his head hitting the wooden floor of the stage as he trembled. I will take responsibility for my actions and will kill myself to serve as penance. Perhaps that will be enough to make up for my crimes. Those words immediately roused the entire crowd to almost an uproar. Many were calling him names and shaming him, while others would spew out their personal disgust of the coach. Izuku though could only tremble in fear. Kamoshida killing himself in response to those thoughts really was no better than killing him through a mental breakdown. No, was it a mistake after all? I don't run away from this, you bastard. Izuku was quickly snapped out of his thoughts, he and Ryuji turning their attention to the furious blonde, along with the crowd surrounding them. Anne was grinding her teeth in frustration, eyes glaring daggers at the crumbled up coach on stage. You think killing yourself will make up for what you've done, it's just running away. You have to answer for your crimes. Take responsibility by facing everything you've caused. We deserve that justice. Shiho deserves that justice most of all. Anne Shiho muttered from the other side of the phone, her hands over her mouth as she struggled to fight back her own tears. And senpai Izuku muttered, biting his bottom lip. He looked at the stage, seeing Kamoshida rise from his slouched-over position to sit on his knees again. You're right. Among the people I hurt, Takamaki-sen was one of the worst. Kamoshida admitted, hands shaking as he gripped his pants. I blackmailed her into having relations with Shiho's spot on the team, but I still ended up hurting that poor girl. What? Shiho muttered, causing Anne to tense up as the truth came out. She wanted to be the one to admit it to Shiho, but that was obviously out of the question now. The entire truth of the matter was being laid out for all to see. I will do as she says and turn myself into the police. Kamoshida declared, falling back on his hands again and breaking down in tears. Please, call the police. I'm going to confess my crimes and take responsibility for it all. Students broke out in an uproar, their confusion building up by the moment. Izuku and Ryuji glanced around the crowd, amazed by the response and the result of their work. The teachers moved through the crowds, ordering all the students to return to class. It would take a while before anyone would listen, as they were too busy building on the conversation of why this happened and how. Through the murmurs, one thing stuck out to Izuku and Ryuji. So those Phantom Thief guys are actually real. Izuku spared Makoto a glance, seeing that the brunette was watching him from the side in apprehension. Izuku wasn't sure would be enough to say it from this distance, but he gave her a single nod. This was what they had been waiting for all along. It was finished. Anne took a deep breath as she felt a wave of relief wash over her. Waiting for this day had been a burden of its own. And to have it all come crashing down so quickly, she couldn't help but feel like a weight was lifted from her shoulders. She looked back at her phone, giving a small but sad smile as she changed the perspective to face her. It's over, Shiho. On the other end, the brunette buried her face in her palms, soft sobs echoing through the speaker. She had set her phone down to the side, but her words could still be heard. You guys, you really did it. I'm so thank you, Anne. Chapter 17, Persona 5 Ost. Confession Secret Piano Version. It took some time for the gymnasium to finally empty itself of students. So many were absorbed into conversations of Kamoshida's actions and the supposed phantom thieves of hearts, teachers were forced to herd them out. Ryuji, Anne, and Izuku hung back, quickly wanting to convene after Kamoshida's confession. Instead of immediately calling the police, Principal Kobayakawa carried Kamoshida off, likely in hopes of salvaging the situation, rather than let it continue to devolve. But no matter what Kobayakawa might do, there was no saving face for the volleyball coach or his career. I can barely believe that all just happened, Ryuji muttered, scratching the back of his head and looking at Izuku. That was, like everything we wanted all in one sitting. Didn't even think it would go like that, you know. Why yeah, I was hoping what we did in the cognitive world would be effective, but that was almost like something out of a dream. Izuku admitted, a frown crossing his features as he wrestled with a mess of thoughts filtering through his mind. Even so, it worked. His heart really did change, Anne said, her voice quiet as she focused on the spot of the stage where Kamoshida had knelt. Yeah, it did. I dunno why I'm tripped in, but I guess it's cause it happened so fast, Ryuji mumbled, turning his attention back to Izuku. This was the right thing to do, right? It was. Izuku nodded, eyes lowering to the ground. I wrestled with the idea for a while, but after seeing Suzui-senpai I know it was for the best. Kamoshida admitted to his crimes, didn't die and is going to jail. We honestly couldn't hope for a better result. Yeah, you're right. Ryuji nodded, biting his bottom lip. Guess I'm still in shock, is all. Maybe we should. He paused when he caught sight of several people approaching, he and Izuku craning their heads to see Miss Hime and two other second-year girls walking up to them. Takamaki-san, Miss Hime called out, finally drawing Anne's attention their way. With a low bow, Miss Hime's voice trembled as he spoke, I'm so sorry. Huh? Anne blinked, looking down at Miss Hime in confusion. I knew what Kamoshida was doing to people, to you, but didn't speak up. I was afraid to be the next target every day, I'm sorry. Miss Hime declared, his hands gripping at his sides. Everyone who knew what Kamoshida was like knew what he was doing to you, but we felt safer pretending we didn't. Even though we didn't know about Kamoshida, we were still just as guilty. The taller girl of the two admitted, her voice showing her concern. I had you all wrong. I spread rumors like every other idiot. I'm so sorry for thinking so little of you. I had no idea Kamoshida put you through so much. I can't even begin to know where to start with an apology. The shorter girl said, looking down at the ground in shame. A lot of people want to apologize, I'm sure. So many of us just assumed about what kind of person you are. We're so sorry. Anne spared a glance across the three, seeing the sincerity in their words and offering a small sullen smile. It's okay, I'm sorry, too. I didn't feel like making an effort in trying to make more friends than Shiho, anyway. But it's all in the past now with Kamoshida. So I'm ready to move on. The girls stared thankfully back at Anne, relieved that the platinum blonde was willing to forgive them for their shallowness. Miss Hime couldn't smile though, his gaze shifting over to Izuku now as anxiousness filled him. He slowly walked up to Izuku, causing the green-haired teen to blink. "I'm so sorry huh? Why?" Izuku asked, staring at Miss Hime in confusion. It was me who spread your criminal record on social media," Miss Hime admitted, causing Izuku to widen his eyes. Ryuji and Anne shared a look of disbelief, staring down at the now bowing boy. "Kamoshida, he had me do it. Told me to spread it out for people to see, but even so, I'm just as guilty for it as him. I'm sorry, dude," Ryuji mumbled, shocked as anyone else to hear Miss Hime admit to the act. Izuku was certainly shocked by this revelation, but didn't feel any amount of anger or irritation build up within him. Instead, he only felt sympathetic for the boy. It was hard to be mad at anyone who was being crushed under Kamoshida's thumb like that. "You have nothing to apologize for. Kamoshida hurt a lot of people including you. I don't blame anyone for what was said or how except for Kamoshida. And he's going to pay for his crimes." Miss Hime slowly looked back up at Izuku, his expression looking conflicted and hesitant. But before more could be said, a nameless teacher quickly approached the group with a glare. "Hey. Hurry up and get to your classes. No more loitering around. Well, I guess we'll see you in class, Takamaki-san," the tall girl of the group said, offering a small bow before turning around and leaving. Miss Hime spared a hesitant look at the teacher before turning back to Izuku. I'll make it up to you somehow, I promise," Miss Hime declared before quickly shuffling off. "Hey Miss Hime," Anne called out before the plain boy was gone. He stopped at the doorway, looking back at her in question. "When you get the chance, you should visit Shiho. You really helped her out by starting that petition. I think Recovery Girl wants to meet you too." Miss Hime blinked in shock, a mixture of emotions welling up within him. It was easy to tell that he looked close to crying, but quickly shook his head as he tried to salvage himself from any embarrassment. "Oh okay. I might just do that if she'll see me," he said, giving Anne a small smile before leaving. The platinum blonde smiled before finally turning to Izuku and Ryuji. "Let's meet up at the usual place. We'll talk about everything then," Izuku suggested, earning a nod from both Ryuji and Anne in acceptance before they finally departed for their classes. As he walked down the hall in silence, Izuku heard the chime of his phone, pulling it out and immediately seeing Makoto's nickname across the screen. He released a nervous breath, quickly tapping on her name and reading the message. "Makoto. We need to talk. What just happened was surreal." Izuku bit his bottom lip, having dreaded the conversation he had put off for so long now. But, wanting to keep his promise, Izuku quickly reassured himself before replying. "Izuku. Okay. Tomorrow, let's meet. I'm sorry to have made you wait so long. I'll explain everything. Man, people weren't so judgy today as usual," Ryuji said, leaning back in his chair as he sat across from Izuku. They had swiftly made their way to the rooftop the moment school had ended, wanting to talk about their I guess after seeing Kamoshida's true colors, he's not the only one who had a change of heart. "Really? It still felt like I was being given a wide berth." Izuku chuckled sheepishly, rubbing the back of his head as he thought back to his classes. If anything, it almost seemed like they were giving him more space than usual. "Really? How weird." Ryuji hummed, though only giving a shrug. "I'm sure it's no big deal. People are probably just freaked out over everything," Kamoshida said. "Speaking of Kamoshida, I think I've figured out how we avoided causing the mental breakdown," Morgana announced, bringing their attention to him. "Leaving his shadow alive was only part of why one didn't occur. Because we were able to send the shadow back to his real self, it wouldn't perish with the rest of the palace when it collapsed. So long as we continue that trend, we won't have to worry about causing any cognitive collapses." "Whoa, so that's it, awesome." Ryuji cowed, quickly slapping Izuku on the back in reassurance. "See? Now we don't gotta worry about any bad crap happening because of us, so long as we do it right." "Why yeah, I suppose so." Izuku smiled, likely more relieved than anyone else to see their actions were able to bring about the most positive scenario. Now that the shock of the suddenness of Kamoshida's confession was gone, there was no denying that they were all in high spirits. Izuku couldn't be prouder of their group for being able to achieve their ultimate goal. "Try not to let the entire school know we're up here, would you?" Anne called out, entering the rooftop and joining the three while her gaze was fixed on Ryuji. "Heh, it's fine. Don't worry so much. We just had a big victory, didn't we?" Ryuji carelessly waved off, earning a small eye roll from Anne, though she couldn't conceal her own mirth as she smirked. "So, how's Shiho doing? What you did for her was pretty sweet." "She's doing okay. Once school ended, I called her up. She said she cried all day, but she's feeling so much better because of it," Anne explained, giving a wistful smile. "She even said that it was just what she needed. But I know she still has a long journey ahead of her before she's going to be fully over it. Not to mention all those rumors about you are pretty much dead now. I'm glad things are looking up for you." Ryuji commented, smiling up at the platinum blonde. That doesn't matter to me. I'm just glad we could give Shiho the justice she deserved. And that she could see it for herself. Anne said, turning a more earnest grin to the three. I'm just glad I didn't accidentally kill Kamoshida's shadow in the process. That ended up being good for both Shiho and Izuku. Yeah, no kiddin'. Good job keeping yourself from burning him to a crisp. I seriously thought you were gonna back there. Ryuji admitted, giving Anne a kind grin. I'm still proud of the choice you made, Anne-senpai, even without knowing the consequences. Izuku agreed, looking up at Anne with a sincere smile. Lady Anne is simply kind, after all. Morgana chuckled, his voice becoming soft as he addressed Anne as usual. Well, I don't know if I would say it was out of kindness. Anne dismissed, waving a hand in front of her face. I just thought revenge would best be served if he lived to see it all through. Now that he's fully aware of how terrible he is and what he's done, he'll be groveling on his knees for forgiveness for the rest of his life. I think, in a way, that's a fate worse than death. Holy shit, was Ryuji's eventual answer, the three boys staring up at Anne in both awe and a bit of intimidation. I didn't realize Anne-senpai could be that scary, Izuku muttered, swallowing a lump in his throat. I can't say I disagree with her sentiment, but wow. Morgana chuckled quietly, a little thrown off by the thorns of his rose. Anyway, now that that's over, Ryuji cleared his throat, trying to move on from the subject, we should lay low for a bit. Considering people knew we were snooping around before about Kamoshida, they're definitely gonna look at us first over what happened. Not that they'll ever be able to find out about the other world. Yeah, fingers are already pointing at you both. Mainly Izuku, though. Anne said, causing the green-haired teen to widen his eyes and turn his attention back to her. People think you might have worked together, but that Izuku has some hidden quirk that he used to make him confess. What the shit? They singled me out, Izuku blurted, eyes wide as plates in disbelief. But I'm quirkless. Everyone knows that after seeing my criminal record. People are brushing that off with you being a late bloomer or that you were somehow able to cover it up from the cops. Anne shrugged, her words causing the green-haired teen's shoulders to slump at his sides. Sorry, that's just what I've been hearing. They think the calling card was just some sort of distraction or some way to make your quirk activate. You should hear some of the theories people are spinning up. I bet none of them are even close to what actually went down. If someone were to spin that theory, I'd think their imagination was way too nutty. Ryuji chuckled, reaching over and patting a sulking Izuku on the back in comfort. Plus, it's not like they can prove you did it. Like you said, you're quirkless. They can't just make one magically appear. Maybe, but that's not going to stop people from thinking I did it. It also explains why my classmates were staying at a distance, Izuku mumbled dejectedly, eyes cast to the side in thought. Though, thinking about it, Izuku couldn't help but chuckle. Well, it's not like anyone had a good opinion of me before, right? So I guess it's something I'll just have to accept. Izuku, Morgana muttered, a bit of sympathy shining in his slitted eyes. If that's the worst thing to come of stopping Kamoshida, I'm okay with it. Izuku decided, his lips turning up into a smile. I have you guys now, so it won't be so lonely. From the beginning, Izuku had always expected to be an outcast among his classmates. It was that way no matter what school he went to. So knowing that he had friends despite his previous circumstances helped reassure Izuku in spite of it all. Aw shucks, man. You're gonna make me blush over here. Ryuji laughed, reaching over and pulling Izuku into a headlock. You know I got your back, dude. We are a team, after all. Anne smiled in support, giving Izuku a thumbs up. As expected of our leader to bear such a cross on his back. Now, moving on, we have one last matter to deal with. Morgana chuckled before tiptoeing his way to Izuku's bag. Nuzzling inside, he produced the gold medal that served as Kamoshida's treasure. I would like for us to find a way to make use of this medal. It's been annoying to deal with while I'm in the bag. Oh, yeah. I almost forgot we had that thing. Ryuji laughed, releasing Izuku from his dizzying hold and leaning forward to inspect it. A genuine gold medal, huh? Even though it's from the palace, it sure looks and feels real enough. Maybe we can sell it. I feel like that might raise suspicion, but it's not like it's the real medal. Izuku hummed, holding his chin in thought. The real one is likely at his house, so people wouldn't really be able to tie them together. Cool, we're selling it then. I'll look up some prices. Ryuji grinned, quickly pulling out his phone and browsing the internet. It only took him a few moments to find a result, his lips shifting into a frown. What? Only 30,000 yen. It's an effing gold medal though. You'd think it was worth more. The amount of actual gold in the medal is probably low. Otherwise a medal this size would go for a much higher price. Izuku suggested, picking the medal up and inspecting it closely. Hey, so just throwing this out there, but remember that time I lent you money in middle school, Ryuji? Anne suddenly asked, an innocent smile crossing her lips. What? No way, that was 30,000 yen's worth. Ryuji blanched in disbelief, standing up from his seat. I mean, of course not, but if you take the years of compound interest I'm sure it would add up. Anne cheekily chuckled, crossing her arms behind her back. Interest my ass. I'm almost positive you gotta agree to all that in like writing or something. Ryuji exclaimed, eyes quickly looking to Izuku. Help me out here, man. You're smart and stuff so you would know. Izuku looked between the scrutinizing gazes of Anne and Ryuji, some sweat trailing down his face. I'll stay out of this one, he muttered, bowing his head in apology. Oh, come on dude. It's not like I'm going to take all of it. I'm sure we'll divide it among the group, so my portion and then part of your portion. Anne said with a mischievous grin. Oh, that is so not cool. Ryuji complained, shoulders slumping in disbelief. Back on topic, I agree we should lay low. Morgana chuckled, obviously amused by the entire conversation. But if we can get that sold quickly, perhaps we can celebrate with the money. Oh, that's not a bad idea. Maybe we should go somewhere expensive and fancy. Ryuji suggested in excitement, looking at Anne and Izuku expectantly. Oh, what? But Anne began to complain before stopping herself, humming in thought. Actually, that sounds good. In fact I know a good place we can go. I've been meaning to go there for a while with Shiho. Well, I can't really complain where since I owe money, Ryuji grumbled obediently before turning to Izuku. You cool with that? I'm up for anything you guys choose. I wouldn't know any other place for us to go, anyways. Izuku chuckled sheepishly as he rubbed the back of his head. But I'm looking forward to it. Well, looks like we're in agreement. Though back to the metal, how do you guys plan to sell it? Think we'll be able to get rid of it before your school break is over? Morgana asked, looking around at the three. Usually it would take some time to sell it online, but the man who sold us our guns, Izuku mumbled, recalling some of his time spent in the shop looking for better weapons. I think he told me that if I have something of value he would be willing to purchase. Whoa, really? Sick, dude. Now we don't gotta worry about waiting for some online buyers. Ryuji said in excitement. Then it settled. Tomorrow, me and Izuku will handle the selling the metal to the shopkeeper, since he seems to like Izuku well enough. Morgana volunteered, a nod of acceptance from the green-haired teen. If you guys are able to sell it by tomorrow then we should plan for our victory party sometime this week. Anne suggested hopefully, putting a finger to her chin. How about on the last day so that we can have one last hurrah before the break ends? So on Children's Day, then. Alright, I'm down for that. Ryuji said with no qualms. It will definitely give us something to look forward to on the last day. Izuku smiled, nodding in agreement to the idea. Alright, then we've got our plan. Anne exclaimed, grinning at the three in excitement. Anything else we need to go over? A thought quickly occurred to Izuku, his once mirthful smile slowly morphing into a neutral frown. Yes, actually just one more thing. Izuku spoke, drawing their attention to him now. Before this all started, I promised to let Kodo-san know all about what we did after today, she texted me trying to get some answers. It's going to be difficult to explain, but I've decided that I'm going to tell her everything. Anne and Ryuji widened their eyes, both hesitating to respond immediately. Morgana hummed in thought, lying down and resting on his front legs. Well, it wouldn't be very becoming of you to keep hiding it after you promised to share. I don't think it's a problem. I get that, but that's not gonna be the easiest thing to explain in words. Ryuji said, a thoughtful frown crossing his lips. Hell, I know I'd have a hard time believing it if my first experience was a nosedive right into it. Same here. We got a baptism by fire when it came to the other world. Anne nodded, holding her chin in thought. But here's the other problem. With no castle left, how can you really prove it to her? Kodo-san knows that I wouldn't come up with such an elaborate place just for a lie. I think that she'll believe me. Izuku said, hoping that his oldest friend would be willing to take his word for it. Well, there is another way we can prove it to her. In fact, I can show it to you all right now. Morgana declared, shifting attention back to him. It'll be a bit to cover, but with the castle gone, wait, we just said we'd lay low. Ryuji said, quickly waving his arms back and forth. We should at least give it a couple days before going around like that again. Ryuji reminded them. Good point. I guess we could wait on that. Anne agreed before looking at Izuku. Do you want us to come along to help back up your story at least? Izuku held his chin in thought, considering all of their options before shaking his head. No, it's okay. It might be better to explain it to her one-on-one. And since we're trying to lay low for a bit, it might look less suspicious to be by myself. Up to you, dude. Just give us a call if she needs some extra convincing or something. Ryuji suggested, Anne nodding in agreement. Thanks guys. I'll be sure to let you know what happens. Hopefully it turns out okay. My Hero Academia asked. Mellow twilight, it was only a short while longer that the group continued to converse. With little else left to be said, Izuku and the others parted ways and headed for home. With Kamoshida dealt with, Izuku was now free of his previous anxiety. He walked home with a small smile on his face, ready to put the entire incident behind him. Nice to see you with more of a spring in your step. Morgana chuckled, currently leaning over the green-haired teen's shoulder. With how stressed you and Ryuji were over the possible results, it's good to see you loosen up a bit. Honestly, having Kamoshida confess today took a huge weight off my shoulders. Izuku admitted, a small smile across his lips. We can finally move on. Izuku reached forward, pulling the gold-painted doorknob leading into LeBlanc. I'm back. Ah, perfect timing. Sojiro answered, craning his head slightly to look at green-haired teen as he entered and flashing a welcoming smile. You have a guest. A guest. Izuku blinked before looking at the front of the bar. His body immediately froze, eyes slowly widening as he caught sight of someone he immediately recognized. His mother, Inko Midoriya. The elder Midoriya slowly turned in her stool, inhaling a breath as she saw her son. She looked much like how Izuku left her. A bit aged in the face and round in size. She was an inch or two shorter than her son, her hair matching green to his. Mom. Izuku Inko muttered, a slow smile spreading across her lips. Tears immediately began to well up in her eyes, her lower lip trembling as she could barely contain her joy. She stood from her stool, spreading her arms out. Izuku baby. Mom. Izuku choked out, ignoring the building tears in his own as he rushed forward and took his mother into a tight hug. Their embrace was long and warm, both pouring their feelings out as soft sobs echoed from both sides. I've missed you, I have too, Inko whispered back, rubbing her son's back tenderly. They slowly broke apart, Inko sniffling a bit as she wiped her eyes. I wish you would call more, but I'm sure you were still adjusting, so I won't nag you over it. Yeah, I'm sorry, Izuku apologized, rubbing the back of his head with a bit of regret. With so much going on in the past several weeks, he had failed to call his mother at all, having instead sent her several texts in reassurance instead. What are you doing here, though? I just wanted to visit, and since it was Golden Week I thought it was a good opportunity make sure Sojiro here was taking care of you properly. Inko explained, releasing a small chuckle as she turned to the cafe owner in question. I still can't thank you enough for taking Izuku when you did. Think nothing of it. It was the least I could do for an old friend. Sojiro chuckled, crossing his arms over his chest. Besides, your boy is pretty well behaved. Aside from getting to school late on the first day, I haven't had to worry about any trouble. He even volunteered to help me out a bit around the shop. I'm glad. I knew that if I could trust anyone with Izuku, it would be you. Inko said, pulling Izuku over to the counter and taking a seat. But how are things going for you? How's your new school treating you? I know it was a tough transition, especially with where you actually wanted to go. Izuku couldn't even begin to tell her how crazy of a month it had actually been for him. Heck, he couldn't even tell her about the stuff that didn't involve the metaverse. There would be no end of worry from his mother. So, focusing on the good that came from it, Izuku gave a genuine smile. It was hard at first, I admit, but it's actually not so bad anymore. I even made a couple of friends. Inko blinked in surprise, her jaw slackening a bit as she processed his words. She was fully aware of the troubles he had with his own classmates, but to hear that he had actually made some friends brought an enormous amount of relief to her. Oh, that's so good to hear. I was so worried that you'd have trouble getting to know others. I'm so happy, Inko said, wiping the mist from her eyes as she fought back another wave of tears. So you made some friends, huh? Good on you. See what happens when you don't draw unnecessary attention to yourself. Sojiro chuckled, smirking a bit as he pulled out a cigarette. Why yeah, I suppose you're right, Izuku hesitantly chuckled out, looking away nervously as he scratched the back of his head. I can't really say I wasn't drawing a bunch of attention to myself this past month. Why don't we go out to dinner? We can talk about this over some food. Inko suggested, her eyes trailing to Sojiro. You should come too, Sojiro. And if she's willing, why don't you invite Fue? No, that's alright. Sojiro quickly dismissed, causing mother and son to blink in confusion. Sojiro quickly composed himself, coughing into his hand. I've got a shop to run after all. Don't worry about me. You two should run along and get caught up. I'd hate to play third wheel on your little reunion. He chuckled, his voice back to its casual laze. That was strange. I wonder what that was about, Izuku mused to himself. There was much he still didn't know about Sojiro though, and guessed it was something about his private matters. The man definitely liked to keep to himself. I see. No problem then. We'll catch up more when we get back. Then Inko weakly nodded, though her expression seemed to show a bit of understanding. Come on, Izuku. I'm sure we can find a nice quiet place to eat at. Have you been to many places? And no, not really. Just this one beef bowl shop, but that's it. Izuku admitted, remembering when Ryuji had treated him after receiving his persona. In other news, a local high school volleyball coach was arrested earlier today for crimes of sexual harassment and abuse towards students. Izuku immediately hesitated, eyes quickly looking back up at the hanging TV. Sojiro and Inko also shifted their attention back, some recognition in their eyes. The picture of Kamoshida appeared on the screen next to the broadcaster, causing Izuku to inhale a breath. Strangely enough, the man confessed to the crime himself in front of the entire school this morning. Whether he was under the influence of a quirk is still unknown. He is currently in police custody, and more information will soon be given once interviews with the assailant have finished. We took the time today to interview some of the students at this academy and find out how much his actions had affected their lives. On the screen, while their faces were hidden by the camera angle, the uniform of the students on screen made it obvious as to what school it was covering. Sojiro and Inko spared a glance at Izuku, inspecting the uniform he was still wearing for confirmation. "So it is a coach from your school," Sojiro muttered, scratching the back of his head. "How scary to have this happen at your school even though you just got there." Inko mumbled out, looking at her son in concern. "Tell me you didn't have to deal with such a horrible man, Izuku." Well, I definitely saw him around," but Izuku muttered, trying his best to play it off without exposing just how much he actually had been involved with Kamoshida. "Geez. Talk about a major setback. I'm sure that's embarrassing for the school." Sojiro hummed before looking back at Izuku. "Well, at least you didn't get swept up in that mess. Things are probably going to get a bit hectic at your school, so I'd continue to keep a low profile, if I were you." "Why yeah, I'll try," Izuku mumbled, thinking it a bit funny that it was already part of his plan to do so. He looked at his mother and gave a somewhat forced smile, hoping to reassure her. Don't worry about that, though. I wasn't there long enough to be affected, you know. Let's go and get dinner." "Why yeah, okay." Inko nodded, a small bit of concern lingering in her voice before fading as she smiled at her son. "Katsudon is still your favorite, right? Let's see if we can find a restaurant that serves some. We don't have to go through all that trouble, Mom." "It's okay." Izuku chuckled, but nonetheless appreciative as they walked out the door. "Those two are certainly close, huh?" Sojiro chuckled, a small smirk playing on the corner of his mouth as his gaze drew back up to the television. "I'm sure you would have been a bit like that. Wakaba." Inside a dark room cluttered by papers, clothes and instant food boxes, a lone girl sat in front of an excessive computer rig, her monitor providing the only bit of light in the room. She was slumped low into her computer chair, her eyes staring at the monitor with envy. On the screen, it depicted the inside of LeBlanc, having watched the entire exchange between the Midoriyas and Sojiro in silence. Her thoughts had been locked on one specific moment though, her monitor replaying the hug between Izuku and his mother over and over again. It was like torturing herself, looking at something she couldn't experience ever again. And it was all her fault. It must be nice Izuku had spent quality time with his mother that night until late since he was currently on vacation. Inko even stayed the night at LeBlanc with him, Izuku naturally giving her the bed while he slept on the floor. Morgana had finally come out and greeted his mother kindly, Inko taking a quick liking to the cat and tenderly petting him. Morgana certainly didn't refuse the attention and love that the mother gave him, eliciting a few hidden laughs from Izuku. The cat even laid next to her instead of Izuku that night. But with the night come and gone, Inko headed to the public bathhouse, cleaning herself up as she prepared to leave. "So your mom isn't staying, huh? That's a shame." Sojiro hummed, a bit of disappointment in his expression as smoked behind the bar. "Yeah. She said that she just wanted to spend some time with me last night but didn't want to impose for too long. I tried to tell her to stay, but she seems pretty adamant." Izuku admitted, somewhat confused by his mother's decision to leave already. "Well, nothing to do about it if her mind's already made up." Sojiro hummed, messing with the coffee maker and preparing it for any customers that might come in. "Be sure to walk her to the station once she's back." "Of course." Izuku nodded, having already planned such. The bell of the shop's store suddenly rang, announcing someone's arrival. Izuku half expected it to be his mother, but soon saw a younger woman with silver hair instead. She looked so familiar. "Good morning." She greeted, her voice low but no less appealing because of it. Her eyes drifted to Sojiro, flashing a curt smile. "Morning to you. What'll you have?" he asked, returning the smile with his own. "The house special, please," Sei said, walking over to the bar and taking a seat. Her eyes landed on Izuku, who unintentionally had been staring at her. "Is something the matter?" she asked, raising a brow. Though unmistakably, she felt a bit of familiarity in seeing the boy as well. "Sei Onisan." Izuku suddenly blurted out, causing both Sei and Sojiro to blink and look up at Izuku in confusion. "You two know each other?" Sojiro asked, eyes trailing back and forth between the two. "Wait, it can't be," Sei muttered, holding her chin as realization lit up in her eyes. "Little Izu." My Hero Academia asked. Flustered, Izuku flushed a bit at the nickname, remembering now that the Nijimura sisters actually both had nicknames for him. Though Makoto was upset the first time Sei used the nickname, likely because she wanted to use it as well. Hi, Sei Onisan, it's been a while. What a surprise. It's been almost 4 years now, right? Sei said, a small nostalgic smile crossing her lips. I have to say, you've certainly grown. I guess you couldn't always be shorter than Makoto. But I have to say, I'm certainly surprised to see you here in Tokyo. Did you and your family move into the area or are you simply here on vacation? It is Golden Week after all. And no, due to some circumstances, I'm actually going to school here. Izuku explained, rubbing the back of his head before a thought occurred. Koto-san hasn't told you? I'm going to Shujin as well. Oh, are you? So you've already met back up with Makoto then? Sei hummed in surprise. Well, she has been quite busy with her studies. Though she did mention some sort of drama occurring at her school, I thought perhaps she was talking about the incident with the instructor who confessed yesterday, but another bell jingled from the door, this time Inko being the one to walk inside. Sorry I took my time. I was having such a refreshing bath. Inko apologized as she entered before looking up, her eyes soon meeting Sei's. Onijima-chan. Is that you? Midoriya-san. It's been a while. Sei smiled, turning to the mother and standing up to talk. You look gorgeous, Najima-chan. It's been so long. Inko said, a bubbly aura radiating from Izuku's mother as she approached the silver-haired beauty and grabbed her hands. I remember that your family had moved to Tokyo, but with such a big city I didn't think we'd run into you here. I suppose the world is a bit smaller than we thought. Sei chuckled, somewhat infected by Inko's attitude. Yes, I suppose so. Inko chuckled, but suddenly widened her eyes and looked at her son. Oh, Izuku. We need to get moving. My train will be arriving soon. Oh, okay. I've got your bag right here, so we can go now. Izuku said, holding up the meager suitcase that his mother brought along. I'm sorry to cut our reunion short, Najima-chan. My train will be leaving soon, but perhaps next time I'm in town we can get some coffee and catch up. Inko offered with a smile, eliciting a small chuckle from Sei. I would like that. I hope you have a safe trip, Midoriya-san. Sei said in goodbye, looking over to Izuku and smiling. Perhaps I'll see you around as well, little Izu. Heh, it's strange to call you that now that you've grown up. It's okay. See, completely up to you. Izuku stuttered out, his face flush again as he quickly dashed past her with his mother's luggage in hand. Admittedly, Izuku was fully aware of how beautiful Sei was. That had been apparent to him since he first met her as a child. Makoto was keen on teasing him over getting so nervous around her when they were little. Hearing her call him by that old nickname she gave him was nerve-wracking on its own. Goodbye, Sejiro. I'll be back soon, I promise. And again, thank you for all your help. Inko said, bowing in appreciation toward the shopkeep. Take good care. I'll be seeing you. Sejiro smiled, waving as she and Izuku took their leave. Turning to Sei, Sejiro quirked a brow up. So, you're familiar with the Midoriyas too, huh? That's right. My family used to live close by to them. Izuku was good friends with my younger sister, in fact. Sei explained, a small smile lining her lips as she recalled the memories. He was the most adorable thing as a child. My sister used to protect him like a lion over her cubs. That doesn't surprise me. The kid's pretty jumpy and shy. Sejiro chuckled, placing Sei's coffee in front of her. Consider the first cup on the house. I'm so surprised that we saw Najima-chan again. Have you seen her around often? Inko asked, the two walking through the street toward the train station. And no, this is the first time I've seen Sei Onisan. Izuku admitted, shaking his head. But I do see Koto-san a lot at school. Oh, really, that's nice to hear. I always wondered if you'd ever be able to see their family again. Inko hummed before her expression took a small turn for sullen. It had hit them hard when they lost their father, after all. It was sad to see them going without being able to help them. Izuku's expression fell, memories of their departure flooding through his head. He had cried a lot that day, standing there saying his goodbyes to Makoto and Sei. He and Makoto hugged for a good while until they were forced apart, the sisters immediately being taken away. Yeah, but they both seemed to have handled it. Koto-san is top in her classes and student council president. Oh, really? That's good to hear. Perhaps on my next visit, I'll get to see her again. Inko hummed, a small smile replacing her frown again. As the two walked down to the train station entrance, Inko turned around and took her bag. I'm happy to see that things have been going good for you so far, Izuku. I was so worried that it might be much harder for you. You could stay a little longer, Mom. It is Golden Week. Izuku suggested, still somewhat confused by his mother's decision to leave so soon. No, this is fine. I was just happy to be able to spend time with you as much as I did. Seeing you smile again after everything you've been through made me so overjoyed. Inko said, tears already building up in her eyes. I promise to visit again soon, so keep making friends like you have been and stay out of trouble. And keep taking care of Sojiro, too. He can be a bit gruff, but he's got a great heart. I will, Mom. Thanks for coming. I love you. Izuku said, walking up and hugging his mother close. Inko wrapped her arms tightly around her son, bearing a grip that made it seem like she wouldn't let go if given the choice. Morgana suddenly popped his head out of Izuku's bag, letting out an affectionate meow. Inko and Izuku broke the hug, both giggling as Inko reached forward and pet the cat on his head gingerly. With that, Izuku waved goodbye to his mother, watching as she made her way through the station and toward her train. You've got such a sweet mother, Izuku. Morgana said sincerely, looking up at the green-haired teen. Izuku bit back tears, rubbing his arm over his eyes to push away any water building up. Why yeah, I really do. Izuku had waited until noon before going out for the day. As promised, he was going to meet up with Makoto and Shibuya to finally talk. He made sure to check online beforehand to see when Untouchable closed. Thankfully it would be open until late, meaning he could postpone selling the medal until after his conversation with Makoto. Izuku doubted that this would be a short conversation, after all. With so many bases to cover, it certainly built upon Izuku's anxiety. He was already waiting at Shibuya train station for Makoto, his foot tapping incessantly. Oh okay, what's the best way to explain this? Maybe I should start with the palace. No, that wouldn't make sense out of context. Probably the world itself, first but wait, it's not the same as when I went, I'm not taking her into the cognitive world. I have to start right from the beginning, but at what point is that? You sure are nervous all of a sudden. Izuku heard the cat's voice. Morgana sat in his bag that rested on a bench, watching him with his head tilted. You were having such a good time hanging out with your mom, but that quickly turned around. How am I supposed to tell her, Morgana-san? I wouldn't believe it without seeing it for myself. This is nothing like a quirk. Izuku asked in panic, his eyes cracking as his parade of worries continued to march on. Even if I wanted to show her, the palace is gone. I don't have any way to prove it to her. Well, that's not actually true. Morgana hummed, causing Izuku to blink and pause in surprise. I told you that there was something I needed to show you and the others, after all. Izuku opened his mouth, a new group of questions arising from Morgana's words. Midori. Before he could get a word in though, he heard his familiar nickname called out, quickly turning to the side to see Makoto approaching. Morgana quickly hid himself away, leaving the green-haired teen to face the brunette alone. Sorry if I made you wait. No, it's okay, Izuku muttered out, straightening his body out as he stood up to meet her. I guess you've waited a lot longer than I have, in a way. And not that I wanted to, but wait. Calm down. Take a moment to breath. Makoto chuckled, holding up a hand to calm him down. She could tell that this was eating him up, giving him a small but sad smile. Before we even talk about everything, why don't we go and grab some lunch? Huh? Izuku blinked, shocked by her offer. But aren't you mad? No. I was upset, I won't lie. But since you're keeping your promise and telling me, I can't really be too upset. Makoto reasoned, pushing her bangs behind her ear. Besides, after everything that happened, how can I be mad? You guys succeeded. You put a stop to Kamoshida and made him confess. Whatever the method, you and your friends put a stop to a terrible man. I think that deserves more praise than scorn. Koto-san, Izuku mumbled, some of his troubles beginning to evaporate thanks to Makoto's understanding. Come on. There's a quiet little cafe we can go and sit down at. Don't worry, my treat. Makoto smiled before turning away to lead him forward. Izuku smiled, still a bit anxious, but thankful for the relief he felt on most of his worries. He quickly caught up to Makoto, the two making their way through the crowded crosswalk leading into the heart of Shibuya. There were large numbers of people out and about, all likely going on their own shopping sprees as they enjoyed the time off given to them for Golden Week. Maneuvering through the crowd, Makoto led Izuku to a small diner on the second level of a Main Street building. To his surprise, it was only about half full inside, likely because most were too in a hurry to notice such a quaint diner and were more likely to go to the Big Bang Burger across the street as well as the Beef Bowl shop. You ran into Big Sis today? Makoto blinked, mildly surprised to hear about the encounter. Yeah. She came by the diner that my current guardian owns. Izuku nodded, sipping on the iced tea. Makoto ordered them both. I see. I'm sure she was quite a bit pleased to see you again. Makoto hummed before a small smirk edged at the corner of her mouth. So did she call you Little Izu? Izuku nearly swallowed his straw, his cheeks flushing the moment he heard the nickname again. He tried to process an answer, but it only came out in a sputtering mess. Makoto merely chuckled, placing a hand over her mouth. I'll take that as a yes. She's certainly grown more beautiful over time, hasn't she? She grew out of her tomboy phase earlier than I did, though she still likes to ride motorcycles and kickbox. Why yeah, she's still very pretty, Izuku mumbled shyly, scratching his head furiously as he tried to think of some sort of redirection he could use to escape the embarrassing conversation. Considering the nostalgia steak they were both eating, he was certainly remembering a few similar such talks from before like this. You know, whatever happened with Kamoshida, no one can deny how amazing it was to see him confess to his crimes on his own. Makoto said, tactfully switching subjects as she stared down at her tea, leaning her face on one arm. But from all the whispers I kept hearing, everyone was looking at you as the culprit, with some mystery quirk even saying that it only made you even more terrifying. Her smile was gone, a frown of irritation taking its place. Why yeah, I know. And senpai told me she heard stuff like that too. Izuku admitted, reaching up and rubbing his neck before smiling in reassurance. But that's okay. I already accepted that even if they look at me like that, I won't mind. I was able to help save the students under Kamoshida. That's enough for me. Heh. I was kind of expecting that response. Makoto smiled a bit before it fell again, eyes drifting back to her half-eaten food. You might have been the one to do it, but even so. Kamoshida was the villain in this situation. You would think more would at least cease in their gossip. They don't even know who did it. Makoto looked back up, concern obvious in her eyes. Are you sure that there's no way that you can be linked to what happened, though? To be perfectly honest, yeah. Izuku admitted, looking to the side in thought. If an investigation starts up into the cause, it's likely they'll never be able to figure it out. The method is strange, to say the least. I see. Well, I think we've spent enough time avoiding the subject. Are you ready to tell me everything? Makoto asked, folding her arms in front of her as she leaned on the booth table. Okay. Now remember, Koto-san. I need you to keep as open of a mind as possible. This is going to sound strange and sound like nothing you would have ever expected, but you have to believe me when I say that everything that I'm about to tell you is completely true. Izuku forewarned, causing Makoto to raise a brow. Certainly it can't be that crazy. Makoto suggested, though the sincere expression on Izuku's face told her otherwise. Well, okay. I'll do my best to be as open-minded as possible. Izuku inhaled a deep breath before beginning to explain everything. From his first encounter in the cognitive world with Ryuji to the castle formed by Kamoshida's twisted desires. Meeting Morgana and learning the truth behind the castle. And sudden involvement in the case. He spent a great deal of time explaining the cognitive world itself, thinking that if he was able to make that clear enough, the rest of what he had to say would be easier to understand. Makoto was always intelligent and could keep up with complex conversations like this. Though judging from her expression, it wasn't making things any more reasonable. Throughout his monologue, Makoto barely said a word, only throwing in small objections or questions at parts she needed more clarification on. Her expression showed an unsettled discomfort, likely wrestling with a wealth of information that Izuku was feeding her. Izuku expected it to be overwhelming, but hoped that by the end of it all, she would be able to at least know that he wasn't lying. And at the end of it, we fought the shadow version of Kamoshida and took his treasure. Izuku said, reaching the end of his story and breathing out. Sorry, I was talking for a while. I need to catch my breath. Alright, Makoto mumbled, her head tilted down and holding the tip of her chin as she became thoughtful. Izuku sipped on his tea, watching Makoto anxiously as he waited for any sort of reaction. The lack thereof one yet was not a comfort. Because it meant two things. Either she was trying to process and believe it all, or she already decided that it was all a farce. Koto-san, Izuku mumbled out, drawing her attention back up to him. I know this is a lot to take in, and that it might sound extremely outrageous to be real, but it's all the truth. You know I wouldn't spin up a story like this just to lie to you, right? Yeah, I know, it's just, Makoto said quietly, eyes averting from him. This is far more complicated than anything I was expecting. I thought that, maybe, you hired someone with a truth-telling quirk or guilt-mounting quirk perhaps, but this is beyond imagination. I know. If I didn't see it for myself, I probably wouldn't believe it either. Izuku muttered, his hands clenching at his sides. But with the castle gone, Izuku felt a small nudge from his shoulder back, blinking as he looked down at his side to see Morgana's face peeking through the zipper. I told you I have a way to prove it. If she needs more convincing, then do as I say. Morgana whisper shouted to the green-haired teen, causing Izuku's eyes to widen. Take her back to the train station. I'll tell you more from there. Did you hear that? I thought I just heard a cat hissing, Makoto wondered aloud, eyes glazing over the diner. Oh, no, I didn't. Izuku laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck before clearing his throat. Anyway, I think there's one more way I can prove everything to you. Oh, really? Even with the castle gone? Makoto asked, thinking back to his story. That's right. We have to go to the train station, though. Are you okay with that? Izuku explained, causing the third year to raise a brow. I mean if that's the requirement as you said, then I'm all for it. Let's go. Izuku stood at the entrance of the station, standing just in front of the escalators leading down to the lower level with Makoto next to him. Izuku quickly brought up the metaverse app, a bit nervous when it came to Morgana's plan. So what do we do now? Makoto asked, waiting patiently for Izuku to continue. 1 second Izuku muttered, deciding that hiding Morgana was no longer needed. He unzipped the top of his shoulder bag, the cat immediately popping out. A cat? Makoto blinked, looking up at Izuku in confusion. Why do you have a cat in your bag? Ah, well you see Izuku mumbled, now realizing that he forgot to bring up the fact that Morgana had come to their world and lived with him as a common household cat. And maybe it's better if you see for yourself. Okay, Morgana. What am I doing now? Alright. Just enter a single keyword. No location or name needed. Type in mementos. Morgana said, though to Makoto's ears she only heard some light meowing. Izuku. Are you talking to your cat? Mementos. Izuku repeated in question, though doing as he asked. Don't worry, this should work perfectly I think. Morgana said, his last second of doubt nearly causing Izuku to fall over. If this didn't work, he was going to feel pretty embarrassed. Entry found. Huh? Izuku and Makoto grunted in surprise, both looking at his phone in question. Just as I suspected. Morgana grinned from his bag, the world beginning to morph around the three. Makoto felt a sharp migraine the moment things began to change, her eyes snapping shut just for a second as she grunted in pain. The moment she opened her eyes back up though, she soon found the entryway to the subway empty. The light of day no longer shined down on them, only an ominous red illumination in its place. What? She muttered out, looking at the distorted sky above them. It was dyed red as if a fire had burned so vastly that it had scattered its plume through the air. All according to plan. I told you it would work. Makoto heard a much younger voice, snapping her head to the side quickly. In front of her stood a small large-headed cat child and next to him a masked teen in a black jacket and full-body jumpsuit. Makoto quickly took a step back in surprise, immediately putting up her guard. What? Izuku, is that you? Oh of course. What makes you say Izuku answered before looking down at himself, eyes going wide in disbelief. Wait, I'm already in my thief gear of course. The shadows nearby are already aware of our presence. Morgana answered, though this time eliciting a small jump from Makoto. Where did this small cat kid come from? Makoto asked, looking up at Izuku. Relax, Koto-san. This is Morgana, who I told you about earlier. I just forgot to mention that he's also the cat that I was carrying around earlier. We had so much to go over, I missed a few details Izuku said, rubbing his neck sheepishly. He drew his attention upward before looking around, the question in his eyes no less than Makoto. But Morgana-san where are we? Allow me to explain. Makoto-san, do you remember what Izuku said about palaces and how they're formed? Morgana asked, turning his attention to the older brunette. Huh? Makoto muttered, holding her chin in thought as she recalled everything. Yes, that a palace is the manifestation of the twisted desires in one's heart. Something that only exists in this reality, correct? Nice. Looks like you catch on as quick as Izuku here. Morgana smiled, placing his paws on his hips. Well, to further elaborate on that, this place is called mementos. Basically a collection of many different existing palaces combined into one. The lone palace only forms in hearts when the desires become exceedingly twisted. Remember that every living person has a shadow, but that doesn't mean that they've been twisted by their desires. Wait, so then anyone's heart can be reached through here. Izuku muttered, sweat trailing down his brow as he looked around. Wait, let's take a step back for a moment. Makoto said, bringing their attention to her. I am still processing all of this. Another reality, a palace for everyone Izuku explained it the best he could and I'm now seeing it for myself, but Makoto looked around, staring up at the pulsating sky. This is inconceivable. It's okay. Take your time to process. It was a lot to take in for me, too. Izuku said before looking at Morgana. You said that there are shadows close, right? Do we need to get out of here? No, we're safe. They're in the lower levels of mementos. So long as we stay on the higher level, we're out of harm's way. Morgana explained, crossing his paws over his chest. I've paid mementos a visit quite a few times before I went to Kamoshida's palace. I can say for sure that we're in no danger. I was planning to tell the entire group about it at once, but this seemed like a good way to at least offer up some visible proof. So let me get this straight, Makoto suddenly said, bringing their attention back to her. The way that you were able to make Kamoshida confess was stealing his treasure, which is the physical manifestation of his desires, and taking it out of his palace. It's strange to think about, but the more I analyze it, the more I see the kind of logic behind it. Remove the core powering the cognition and the cognition crumbles. Morgana's eyes went wide in shock, looking up at Izuku. She already understands it all, that doesn't surprise me. Kodo-san has always been really perceptive. Izuku chuckled, giving the cat a small smile. To think that such a reality exists in this case, seeing is believing. I remember when quirks were considered the world's greatest discovery, but I dare say that this might be a step above that. Makoto hummed, holding her chin as she looked over at Izuku. This has been fairly educational. Perhaps we should be getting back, though. As interested as I am, this place is a bit unsettling. Oh, of course. Izuku nodded, quickly pulling his phone out and opening the navigation app. But several taps, the world around them began to melt away, Makoto widening her eyes as the typical sight of Shibuya train station returned. Welcome back to the real world. Have a nice day. Amazing, so we can enter and exit that world at our leisure, all with a strange navigation app. Makoto hummed in thought, her eyes gazing down at Izuku's phone before trailing up to him. She soon realized that he was suddenly in his everyday clothes again. I had been meaning to ask, but what was with that costume you were wearing? Ah, those garments are the armor of his soul. Morgana answered, now sitting on the ground as he was returned to cat form. It is the rebellion in Izuku's heart that manifests as his safeguard in the other world to protect him from his enemies. I see, Makoto hummed, her eyes staring down at the cat for a moment before blinking. Wait, how come you can talk in this world now? That's just something that happens when someone goes to the cognitive world. Izuku explained this time. Before going there, Morgana-san just sounds like a regular cat. But once you go to the cognitive world, they're able to hear him like you do now. Ah, I see, that's a bit strange, but I can't say it's the strangest thing I've heard today. Makoto chuckled before looking up at Izuku. Do you have anything else otherworldly or outlandish to tell me about? No, that's about it. Izuku breathed out, giving her a small smile. Considering everything they had already told her, it would be a bit much to go into detail about the Velvet Room. I think you're completely in the loop now. I'm sorry it took so long to tell you, but as you can see, among a few other reasons, it wasn't exactly the easiest thing to explain. No doubt about that. Makoto chuckled, a small smile on her own lips. I appreciate you being honest with me. I know that I've been a bit of a pain, but I just thought that I could help out more. As it turns out, it was far more complicated than just lending my support. And not at all. Everything you did for us before was helpful. I'm just glad that I could finally tell you after making you wait so long. Izuku admitted, rubbing the back of his head. You're also taking this all surprisingly well after your initial shock. Morgana commented, feeling a bit impressed. Trust me, it's all still quite a big shock. I'm just using as much of my logic to sort through everything provided. Makoto said, eliciting a small chuckle from the two. So then, that's it. It's all over. Yes. We can head home now. I'm sure all of this has been Izuku started, only for Makoto to shake her head. No, not that. I mean, now that Kamoshida is behind bars, you're all done now, right? Makoto said, causing Izuku and Morgana to pause and look up at her. You no longer have to keep visiting this cognitive world and steal hearts anymore. Izuku hesitated to answer that, realizing what Makoto was saying. He wasn't sure why, but the mere suggestion of being done caused him to sweat nervously, almost as if he had been called out for planning some scheme before he could even execute it. But the idea of stopping now, after doing so much good, it didn't ring well with him. Well, I wouldn't say that. Morgana suddenly stepped in, clearing his throat. Izuku here promised to help me with a little personal problem I'm currently trying to solve. Once that's done, well, Morgana couldn't rightly say it, though. Looking up at Izuku, the two shared their feelings at a glance, an empathetic bond forming briefly between them. And no, I don't think we are. Izuku found himself answering, slowly looking back up at Makoto. The brunette third year widened her eyes, alarm and worry shining in her orbs. Midori, I want you to think carefully about what you just said. Makoto said quietly, her voice sharp and stern enough to make Izuku wince. What you guys did by taking down Kamoshida, it was great. I won't say that you did the bad thing in this situation, but what you guys did. Not only did you take justice into your own hands, but you effectively brainwashed a man, forcing him to feel guilt for his crimes. You are stepping on a very thin line right now. I know. Izuku suddenly snapped, causing Makoto to slightly recoil. Izuku had done so by accident, regret immediately coloring his expression. I am sorry, but I know what we did was definitely towing the line of right and wrong. That's why I promised that if Kamoshida ended up doing something drastic or died, I was going to turn myself in. What Makoto's eyes widened in shock, this being her first time hearing about the promise Izuku made to himself. There was always a danger in what we were doing, and if something had happened to Kamoshida, no matter how bad he was, I could never look up to someone like All Might again if I pretended that it wasn't my fault. Izuku declared, tears beginning to mist at the corner of his eyes. But in the end, he didn't do any of that. He confessed and turned himself in, Kodo-san. I think that we can keep doing more good like that. Izuku Morgana muttered, looking up at the green-haired teen with a small bit of pride and awe. Midori, you can't. Setting aside the ethics of it for a moment, this could be very damning for you. Makoto snapped, taking a step closer to Izuku in concern. You're committing acts of vigilantism in a society of heroes. Using a method that overwrites someone's very cognition. You're already on probation, so if you get caught doing this, the courts won't. I know that. But I'm still willing to risk it. Izuku retorted, his teeth gritting together as he strengthened his resolve. Heroes risk their lives every day protecting people and risk causing damage that could never be fixed to their enemies if they don't hold back. I already decided that I'm willing to risk my life and my freedom if it means saving people. But that's what the heroes are for, Izuku. You always believed in them until now, so why can't you just let them save people? Makoto demanded, her frustration beginning to hit a boiling point as Izuku started to dig his feet in. Because even if heroes save people, they can't save everyone. Especially those who are suffering in silence. Izuku exclaimed, causing Makoto to hesitate for a moment. We helped so many students from having to keep suffering. Suzu-senpai was able to get the justice she deserved. But seeing how much students were suffering and nothing was being done about it, it makes me wonder how many more are suffering like that. How many people are at the mercy of egomaniacs like Kamoshida? Izuku looked Makoto in the eyes again, a fire of conviction burning bright for her to see. There are people who are afraid to speak up, or even when they do they're silenced. I didn't want to be a hero who operated like this, but if we can help more people who are suffering like that, then I want to keep fighting. Even if the world calls us villains or vigilantes, I'm okay with it. Makoto gripped her fists in frustration, tempted to reach forward and give Izuku a slap or even a punch. But in the end, she couldn't do it. The conviction in his eyes, the strength in his words. They were bright enough that Makoto was forced to look away, searching for something, anything she could say that would stop him. But she knew that this was how Izuku always was. Even when he was outnumbered by bullies, he would stand his ground and protect the other kids, even if he was crying the entire time. He would take the beating and endure. Fine. Have it your way, Makoto muttered, releasing a sigh of defeat as she turned her back to him. I won't tell anyone what you've told me, I can promise you that. But I still think that you need to give up on this thieves' business. I'll convince you to give up on it somehow. Kodo-san, my train should be here soon. I'll see you later. Makoto muttered out, tightening her bag against her shoulder before taking her leave without another word. Kodo-san, wait, Izuku called out, but it was in vain. Makoto descended down the stairs, never turning back to look at him. Izuku frowned in worry, hoping that he hadn't just damaged their relationship by making this proclamation. For the first time since he got it, he actually would have liked to hear the arcana he formed with Makoto progress. Instead, he was only met with silence. That got pretty intense. Morgana quietly spoke up, crawling over to Izuku and looking up at him with concern. Are you okay? Yeah. I hope she'll be able to forgive me for it. Izuku admitted, his voice low and sullen. She was there for us, for me, when it was just me and Ryuja-senpai. I wish it hadn't ended up like that. Perhaps she just needs to cool her head off. Morgana suggested hopefully, giving a somewhat forced smile. She had to learn so much today, and I'm sure it threw her mind and feelings through the ringer. Who knows, maybe she'll even want to join us once she's given it more thought. I would like to think so, Izuku dryly chuckled, not putting much stock in such a hope. I'd be happy to have her on the team. Though I'd still be worried since she doesn't have a persona. Izuku released a breath before looking up at the train schedule. His own was swiftly approaching. In the end, he decided to put off his trip to Untouchable until the next day and headed home. Chapter 18, Persona 5 Ost. Meeting, Miss Hima wasn't sure how he got this far, but now that he stood in front of Shiho's hospital room, he could feel whatever bravery he had mustered begin to collapse like a house of cards. He could feel his knees wobbling and the nervous sweat moistening his brow. After Takamaki had suggested that he visit Suzui, the idea had plagued him for several days. After what he'd done, he felt unworthy of even considering the thought. He didn't know what Shiho would say to him. He didn't know if she would even have anything to say to him. There were definitely things he wanted to get off his chest, but he wasn't sure if this was an appropriate time for it. Relax, just relax, you can do this. I came here to apologize and beg for a way to make it up to her. I've made it this far, I just have to do it. Miss Hima reminded himself, taking several deep breaths as he reached for the doorknob to Suzu's room. His hand immediately froze halfway as his fraying nerves took over again. Oh, on second thought, maybe I should come back later. Miss Hima sighed in defeat, not quite as ready as he thought he was to face her so soon. He slumped his shoulders and began to slowly back away. I can't do it, he mumbled to himself, beginning to walk back the way he came. But the sound of a sharp click caused the plain boy to tense up, snapping his head back to see the door opening. To his surprise, a familiar elderly woman stepped out of the room. "Our recovery girl." Ishima blurted out, drawing the youthful hero's attention to him. Oh, hello there, young man. Are you here to see Shiho Suzui?" Recovery girl asked gently, a wrinkled smile stretching across her lips. "I've finished the latest round of her treatment, so she should be well enough to see visitors now. Just know she's a bit tired due to my quirk." Oh, I'm okay," Mishima replied, swallowing the lump in his throat. But before he could say anything else, he suddenly felt the need to show his gratitude to her, quickly bowing to UA's resident nurse. My name is Yuki Mishima. Thank you for everything you've done for Suzui-san. I'm glad to hear that she is recovering well. Oh, so you're Mishima-kun. I was wondering if I would get the chance to meet you," recovery girl replied with a small chuckle, slowly making her way over to the plain boy. "I have to say, I was quite moved by your petition. It was very kind of you to do that for your classmate. I was hoping I'd get to meet you before I completed Suzui-chan's treatment." "Why you wanted to meet me?" Ishima mumbled, feeling a burst of happiness spring forth. He became bashful, unable to stop from smiling as he scratched his head. I'm nothing special." Really dark thoughts encroached his mind in an instant, his smile failing as he remembered his inability to stand up to Kamoshida. "I'm really not nonsense, boy. You had the sense to act when others wouldn't," recovery girl dismissed, giving an encouraging smile. "Too often people give their sympathies to the injured without doing much to make things better. You were at least able to give Suzuchan a chance to get back on her feet by bringing her to my attention. I think that's something special." She gave him a small wink. "So why don't you go and pay her a visit? She's just about finished healing, so she'll soon be discharged from the hospital tonight." Oh, I'm okay," Mishima mumbled, giving a hesitant smile. Thank you again, I'll never forget this." "Neither will I, perhaps we'll see each other again, Mishima-kun. Take care," recovery girl nodded, slowly trotting past him. Mishima smiled as he watched her go, now feeling proud of his decision to plead to her. Recovery girl turned out to be a true hero after all. Just like the Phantom Thieves. "Well, guess I can't turn back after that," Mishima chuckled nervously to himself as he turned back to Shiho's room. Swallowing his fears, the plain boy reached forward and pushed the door open. Inside, he found Shiho sitting on the edge of her bed, rolling her arms to get feeling back in them. It took her a moment before she noticed her guest as she looked up at Mishima in surprise. Hi Suzui-san," he forced out. "Mishima," Shiho replied, her voice a whisper. An awkward silence swiftly followed, neither Shiho or Mishima knowing where to go from there. Mishima rubbed his arm and cast his gaze to the ground as he worked up his courage to speak. "Mind if I come in, Suzui-san?" "Okay. Come in," Shiho slowly answered, giving Mishima some relief as he walked inside. "Thanks, you look well." Recovery girl really delivered, huh? Mishima asked, hoping to clear the air with some small talk. "Yeah. She is pretty amazing," Shiho nodded, looking down at her now functional arms. What could have taken around a year to heal was fixed in only a couple weeks. And only that long because she was seeing my progress. Mishima noted the small trail off at the end of Shiho's sentence, but didn't put much thought into it. "That's awesome, I'm really happy for you," he offered her a hopeful smile as he looked back up at her. Another silence encumbered them. Mishima wrung his hands in front of him nervously as he worked up his nerve to continue. "Come on, I have to say it. It's why I came here in the first place." "Suzui-san," Mishima's words caught in his throat, feeling his eyes mist over as the reminder of his weakness overwhelmed him. "I'm so sorry, I was too afraid to do anything. I was too much of a coward to ignore what Kamoshida told me to do and you suffered for it." Tears rolled down his cheeks as he looked Shiho in the eyes. Please forgive me for being so useless." Shiho didn't answer him immediately. Grief and understanding colored her expression. If he had come a few days ago, she would have definitely blamed him for his part in the pain she suffered that day. But watching Kamoshida's confession had reminded Shiho of who was truly responsible. After taking deep breath, Shiho finally spoke. "You have nothing to apologize for, Mishima. You were hurt by Kamoshida like everyone else on the team. I didn't speak up either. We were all too afraid to put a stop to it. You knew what would happen if you refused." "I would have taken a beating if it meant avoiding what would happen," Mishima shakily responded, rubbing his eyes on his sleeve. "I should have." Shiho didn't know what more she could say. So she only offered what little inspiration was keeping her going right now. "Well, Kamoshida is gone now. We can at least rest easier knowing that," Shiho suggested, forcing a small smile to give Mishima some reassurance. "Why, yeah, you're right about that," Mishima nodded, her words managing to spread the beginnings of a smile across his face. I wanted to talk to you about that as well." Shiho blinked in mild surprise. "You did? Yeah, if you're okay with it. Have you heard much from Takamaki-san how Kamoshida was taken down?" Miss Hima asked, pulling his shoulder bag off and unzipping the top. Well, I saw the confession for myself, but not really much else on how or why. Shiho mumbled, not sure how to answer that. She remembered that Anne and Izuku had plotted Kamoshida's downfall together, but she never heard the details of how. All she knew was that whatever they did worked extremely well. I figured she wouldn't say much. After all, she probably had a hand in it. Miss Hima chuckled, his mood seemed to lighten immediately as he thought of the thieves. He produced a small red card from his bag, a strange doodle on the back. Miss Hima walked over, holding the card out for Shiho to take. Before Kamoshida confessed, he randomly took over a week off from school. But before that, a bunch of these cards were posted on the school bulletin board. Shiho read through the message, eyes lighting up in interest as she reached the end. The Phantom Thieves of Hearts. She said the last inscription aloud, unable to discern the reason for sending the message. That's right. I'm sure it's because of them that Kamoshida confessed like he did. I don't know if it was a quirk or something, but whatever it was, it worked wonders. To make him confess in front of the entire school like that was unbelievable. Whoever the Phantom Thieves are, they sure are amazing. Shiho gave a small smile, his sudden change in mood was infectious. She was grateful to the Phantom Thieves too, after all. Yeah, I'm sure it took a lot of guts to stand up when no one else would. I wish I could return the favor, somehow. Well, I don't know if it's exactly returning the favor, but I think I have an idea of how to show my appreciation, Miss Hima declared, piquing Shiho's curiosity. Well, people know that someone stood up to Kamoshida, most people believe that the calling card they left was just a hoax. But I don't believe that for 1 second. So I'm going to show that I'm a believer in the Phantom Thieves. How do you plan to do that, though? Asked Shiho. Well, like a lot of things nowadays, I thought that taking to the internet would be the best way to make a name for them, Miss Hima explained, grabbing a chair by the wall so that he could sit at eye level with Shiho. I'm planning to make a site devoted to the Phantom Thieves and those who believe in them. I want people to know who they are after what they did. Shiho hummed in thought, finding the plan to be smart and well-meaning. I guess that makes a lot of sense, but are you sure it will last long though? What if this was the only case the Phantom Thieves decide to take? If it is, then at least they know that someone acknowledges what they did. They were the school's heroes when no one else could be, Miss Hima said, his grin spreading as he leaned forward. But to be honest, I want them to keep saving people like us. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are afraid to speak up about their suffering. The Phantom Thieves give hope to people like that. So maybe by doing this, I can help inspire them to keep helping people like that. I think it's worth a try. Shiho took a moment to think. Even though she knew that Anne and Izuku were behind the calling card, she still felt the same as Miss Hima. They were her heroes. They were the heroes of everyone at Shujin who suffered because of Kamoshida. Perhaps it was a bit much to ask her best friend to keep doing this for people, but how many people could use heroes like the Phantom Thieves? People trapped by fear and suffering like she was couldn't call out for help. But maybe the Phantom Thieves could free them from that burden. With that decided, Shiho looked back at Miss Hima, giving a hopeful smile. Can I help then? The moment he finished helping Sojiro open shop that morning, Izuku headed for Shibuya. After delaying his visit to Untouchable the day before, Izuku didn't want to waste any more time. After all, there was no guarantee that the shop owner would even buy it in the first place. But in case the shady shopkeep stayed true to his word, Izuku also made sure to bring a sack full of the loot the thieves had gathered during their heist. Some of this stuff should have some monetary value. I think we'll make a decent yen if this guy actually decides to buy all of it, Morgana said, peeking his head inside the second bag on Izuku's shoulder. I hope so. If not, we'll have to start tossing out the loot we gather. People will usually ask where and how we got it if we bring so much stuff at once, Izuku explained, a thoughtful frown lining his lips. But it's worth a try. True. Considering how shady this guy seems, he may not ask too many questions, hopefully, Morgana guessed. He spared a look at Izuku, the green-haired teen looking a bit more distracted than usual. So about what you said yesterday, huh? Izuku blinked as he looked up at the cat in question. Which part? You know what I'm talking about. The part when you said you still wanted to be a phantom thief. Morgana swiftly reminded him, a feline grin spreading across his face. I no doubt felt the same way, but I didn't think you'd say it so plainly. I was just hoping I could work the idea into your mind and then we could convince Lady Anne and Idiot Ryuji later. So you were planning this from the start, huh? Izuku muttered, realizing that the cat scheme hadn't surprised him in the slightest. Well, even so, we don't know how Ryuji-senpai or Anne-senpai are going to react. What we're doing is risky. Both the law and the shadows have it out for us. You can't say they don't understand that at this point. After everything we did in Kamoshida's palace, I'm sure they're fully aware of the risks, Morgana argued, earning a hum of thought from Izuku. I suppose you're right. I wonder when we should bring it up, though. He replied as he absent-mindedly turned a corner to step into the alley leading to Untouchable. Hey, come on, Kaoru. It's just a few yen. Nothing too excessive. Izuku looked up to see several middle schoolers toward the end of the alley. 3 surrounded one kid by himself. He was a young boy that looked only a year younger than Izuku. The boy, apparently named Kaoru, had a simple bowl cut and wore square-framed glasses. The others didn't look bigger or tougher than him, but were flexing their quirks like a muscle-bound jock. They were nothing special, one of them flashing his long-edged nails, and the other had an array of spikes covering his face. The one leading the bullies had a slightly enlarged hand that gripped Kaoru's shoulder, though Izuku knew that might not be the full extent of its growth. I told you, I don't have money. Now leave me alone. The boy, Kaoru if Izuku heard right, retorted with no hidden irritation, trying to push his way past the 3. Hey man, what the hell? We're just trying to hit the arcade up. You don't gotta be so stingy. One of the bullies in the back huffed as if Kaoru were the asshole in this situation. Just show us what you've got. Leave him alone. Izuku quickly shouted, refusing to let this go on any longer than it had to. Ah shit, it's upperclassman, one of the punks cursed, looking at Izuku in irritation. We're just talking with our bud. Why don't you stay out of it? The leader said, not backing down despite the attention they garnered thanks to Izuku. It doesn't look that way to me, Izuku retorted, gripping his book bag tightly. He didn't want to start a fight, but he had to be ready for one. Just because he was older didn't mean the kids would immediately back off. Hey, Shaoji, the spike-faced middle schooler said, tugging on the leader's shoulder. We should just leave it, he said, pointing forward. Izuku spared a look behind him, surprised to see a small crowd of people gathering up. He hadn't realized that raising his voice had actually caught some passerby's attention. TCH. Fine, the lead bully conceded, looking back at Kaoru and letting him go. We'll see you later, pal. Try to be more friendly next time, would ya? Kaoru didn't answer, only frowning as he watched them leave. The 3 sidestepped Izuku, the green-haired teen watching them cautiously as they walked by. He looked back up at Kaoru, walking up to him now that they were gone. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm good. You got here just as they started, Kaoru answered, giving a thankful grin. Their bark is usually worse than their bite, but I appreciate the help. Thanks. I didn't really do much. I'm glad nothing came of it, at least. Izuku smiled modestly. I appreciate it too. Izuku and Kaoru turned when they heard a familiar voice, surprising the green-haired teen when he saw the untouchable shop owner walking up to meet them. Dad. How long were you there? Kaoru asked, causing Izuku to do a quick double take. Untouchable's owner is a father, just came out for the end of it. Was about to step in if it wasn't for Mumbles over here, the shop owner answered. Mumbles? Izuku blinked owlishly at his new nickname, but the shopkeeper paid him no mind. Are you having trouble at school, Kaoru? And no, they're like that to everyone. I don't get singled out or anything. Plus, they're mostly talk, Kaoru reassured his father, speaking honestly. But forget that. I wanted to come by and see if you needed any help today, Dad. I told you, my shop is running fine. Don't worry about it, Kaoru. You've got some exams coming up, don't you? The shop owner reminded him, jerking a thumb back down the alley. You should head home. Make sure you study up good, alright. But Dad, no buts. Go home and study. Got it. The rough shop owner cut him off, pulling several bills out of his pocket. Here, get yourself some food while you're at it. Kaoru opened his mouth to retort but stopped himself short of actually saying anything. With a hesitant nod, he reached out and took the money. I understand, see you at home, Kaoru turned to Shibuya's ever-bustling crowd. Thanks again for your help, he said, giving Izuku a small bow before finally taking off. I keep telling him not to swing by this place. Maybe I worry him too much, the shop owner huffed, though he seemed to be talking more to himself than Izuku. He spared a glance at the green-haired teen, a small smirk edging at the corner of his mouth. I have to say though, I'm shocked. Didn't expect a mumbly, stuttering kid like you to stand up for someone like that. Huh? Oh, well I know a thing or two about bullies, Izuku admitted, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. Now that doesn't surprise me. But nevertheless, I appreciate what you did. We never properly introduced ourselves, did we? I'm Yunahisa Iwai. Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you, Izuku answered, though he wasn't sure if that was the proper response, since they had talked several times, even if it was only briefly. Well, you obviously came here for a reason. Come on, let's see what you got, Iwai said, turning around and waving for Izuku to follow. Relaxing somewhat, Izuku followed him to Untouchable. Iwai assumed his usual position behind the counter, leaning on the glass as he waited for Izuku to make his request. Bring me something special. How'd you guess I was selling something? The random sack you're toting around is a dead giveaway. Just hope you brought something of value and not a bunch of random junk. Iwai said, reaching into his jacket and putting a lollipop in his mouth. Well, the main thing I was selling was this. Izuku reached into the sack, producing the gold medal they received from Kamoshida's palace. Iwai took it from Izuku, a critical eye examining the medal for a moment. Well, it looks authentic enough. Feels like the real deal, too. Still, I'm not sure how much value I can get out of this, Iwai hummed, pulling a laptop out from the counter and opening it up. He took a few minutes to search online for a price. Izuku had done his research even after Ryuji told him the initial price, but thought it best to let Iwai see for himself. The hell? This thing is worth 30,000 yen. Iwai spared a look at the medal before looking up at Izuku for a moment. With a huff, he nodded. Okay. I'll buy it off you at full price. Izuku's eyes widened. But is that okay? Don't you need to dock off a percentage to make a profit at least? Normally I would, but I figure that this can be my way of paying you back for what you did for Kaoru. I'll at least get my money back regardless, Iwai explained, so you want 30 grand or not? Okay. If you don't mind, I'll accept, Izuku agreed, feeling a bit awkward at accepting full price. He was expecting to get some money, but not this much from the medal alone. It was part of why he brought the loot in the first place. Good. Then I'll take that and you get this. Iwai reached under his counter again and pulled out a sapphire box. He tossed the medal inside and pulled out several bills, quickly counting them before handing the money over to Izuku. So, is that all? Or do you have anything else to show me? Yes. This was all much smaller stuff, but I wanted to see if you would take them too. Izuku explained, handing the entire sack over to Iwai. Taking a look inside, airsoft shop owner's expression lit up with surprise and curiosity. Where the hell did him? Iwai quickly caught himself, shaking his head. Right. I shouldn't be asking questions. That's my policy. But you're stranger than I thought, kid, he chuckled. Izuku gave an awkward laugh in return. Thinking about the contents of the bag, he realized that it was probably suspicious to bring their entire haul in one sitting. I can't believe you walked out of there with 50,000 yen. Morgana said, feeling pride in the fact that Izuku was able to walk away with far more money than either expected. I guess it really does pay to take a chance like that. It's a good thing that shopkeep is kind of shady. I doubt you would have been able to sell all of that so quickly anywhere else. He didn't ask for ID or anything. That's standard practice at a pawn shop, Izuku mumbled, feeling conflicted over their sale. Iwai sense seems decent, but I can see why Ryuji-senpai said he was shady. You're thinking too much. Besides, you were no less shady selling him all that stuff, you know, Morgana teased, Izuku wincing as he failed to come up with a counter-argument. He stepped through the gates leading to his train, looking up at the neon signs displaying the schedule. It looks like several trains were delayed today. We might be here for a bit. Might as well tell the others that you were able to sell the medal. Now we can finally get our celebration underway, Morgana suggested, Izuku smiling in agreement. That's a good idea. And senpai said she would check the prices, so it'll be good if she knows we got the entire amount, Izuku said, quickly pulling his phone out to text his friends. Shitty train with its messed up schedule, have to wait here just to get on my own damn line. Izuku felt his body tense as he heard the rowdy complaints not so quietly mumbled close by. My Hero Academia Ost. Hero's shadow, there's no way is something wrong, Izuku? Morgana asked, concerned to see the green-haired teen so stiff. Slowly turning his head to the left, Izuku felt his eyes widen as he saw a familiar face, one he had mixed feelings at seeing once again. Katsuki Bakugo, Izuku's former best friend and longtime bully, was furiously mashing his phone with his thumb. Bakugo still had his explosively spiky blonde hair and blood-redder eyes, not unlike Makoto. He wore a gold-buttoned gray blazer with blue stripes around the cuffs and along the shoulders. Bakugo had also left his white dress shirt under it untucked and had forgotten the use of a tie. A leather bag hung over his shoulder. That's UA's uniform, Izuku thought to himself. It didn't surprise him that even when everyone else was on holiday that the hero training course would still be in session. Of course, Bakugo had gotten in. With his grades, athleticism and powerful explosion quirk, he was practically destined for it. Bakugo must have felt Izuku's gaze as the blonde's red eyes immediately turned to glare in Izuku's direction. But the moment their eyes met, both boys stiffened up. The two stared at each other for what felt like the longest moment in their lives. Izuku felt sweat start to build on his brow and gulped before finally breaking the silence between them. Kaken, he stammered out Bakugo's childhood nickname out of habit. Deku, you bastard, Bakugo cursed, his eyes narrowing at the green-haired teen in suspicion. What the hell are you doing here? Why you see, my new school is in Aoyamichim, SSOI take the train over, and Izuku struggled out the best he could. Oh, that's right. Heard you got a criminal record and shit, Izuku flinched at Katsuki's blunt response. Not even Kamoshida could make Izuku feel as terrible about his criminal record as Bakugo could. The teachers at Eldera were total shit at keeping quiet about it. That didn't surprise Izuku at all. None of his teachers were ever sympathetic to his plight when he was younger. I see, he muttered back, his eyes soon trained on the ground. There was a lot that Izuku was expecting Katsuki to say to him. All of it insulting and degrading in some way. After all, once Makoto left them, that had become Bakugo's only interaction with him. What kind of bullshit is that, anyway? How'd a nerd like you end up with a criminal record of all things? Bakugo huffed, eyes narrowing in suspicion. You don't have a quirk or any of that shit. What kind of court shoveled up such a shitty conviction? We've all seen people do way worse for way less. That wasn't the first thing Izuku was expecting out of Bakugo's mouth. He had expected some soul-crushing insults or reminders of his failure to get into UA. But setting aside the explosive teen's usual lack of tact, everything he said was true. Izuku hadn't been able to figure out why he received such a harsh punishment over a dispute that was minor compared to most assaults in this day and age. Especially for a teenager who was just about to graduate from middle school. I don't know. It just happened that way, Izuku answered honestly, dejectedly rubbing his arm. But I'm sure that it had to do with the person I stopped. I don't know how, but things happened way too fast. Before I knew it, I ended up with a criminal record. Bakugo was silent, seemingly observing Izuku for some sort of lie or reason to pounce on him. Instead, he merely clicked his tongue and snapped his head away. TCH. That's what you get for sticking your nose in something you shouldn't, like you always fucking did. Such bullshit, and I was looking forward to crushing you myself at the UA entrance exam. You didn't even get a chance thanks to that shit, huh? Izuku's eyes lit up in shock, looking at Bakugo in disbelief. That was nothing at all like what Bakugo had spat at him before his arrest. He specifically remembered him telling Izuku to not even bother taking the test. The way Bakugo was talking was throwing Izuku off. Kaken, did something happen? Huh? Bakugo grunted out, violently snapping his body to turn and look at Izuku. The hell's that supposed to mean, bastard? And nothing. I didn't mean anything by it. Izuku quickly said, waving his hands in front of him in surrender. I'm just you don't seem as volatile is all. Izuku went pale after his last statement, realizing that it was practically asking Bakugo to assume his previous role as his bully. But despite Izuku's fears, Bakugo didn't retaliate with a slew of curses and insults. Instead, the fierce expression he often wore softened. His animalistic scowl became a passive glare, looking away from Izuku as he clicked his tongue. Whatever. I don't got the energy to waste on scum outside of UA. Despite his biting words, Bakugo's behavior was almost nice compared to how Izuku remembered him. Taking a moment to observe his childhood friend, Izuku noticed something different about him entirely. When he would follow Bakugo around as children, he would always radiate this air of superiority and confidence. It was part of what Izuku admired about the explosive teen despite his constant abuse. But looking at him now, it was almost like someone had punched a hole in that. Something had wounded his pride and shaken his self-assurance that he would always be on top. The last time Bakugo acted like this, it was after his first loss to Makoto. Someone had beaten him. Kaken. What? Izuku flinched when Bakugo snapped his head up to look at him. And nothing important. I just wanted to ask how things were going at UA for you, Izuku said, trying to determine the source of Bakugo's state. The question itself was enough to cause Katsuki to tense up, like the mention of it was enough to strike a nerve. How do you think it's going, scum? I told you I was gonna become the world's #1 hero. Bakugo answered, that school is just another stepping stone. I'll be at the top again soon enough, so don't forget it. Oh, of course, I've got no doubt about that. Izuku quickly said, careful not to fan the flames further by digging any deeper into the subject. He had gotten his answer, anyways. He's not at the top at UA. So that means someone beat Kaken. The station echoed with the sound of screeching rails, the two looking up to see a train arriving. Izuku quickly recognized it as the transfer leading to his former hometown. Bakugo huffed, tightening his bag against his shoulder as he lurched forward and prepared to get on. See ya, nerd, he murmured out, waiting by the edge of the platform for the doors to open. Izuku opened his mouth, wanting to say something. Even though their relationship was as bad as it gets, Izuku still felt compelled to try and talk to him. Finally, as the train doors slid open, one subject came to mind. I saw Kodo-san again. That one statement was enough to freeze Katsuki in place. Craning his head back, Izuku was met with as intense of a glare as he had ever seen from Bakugo, subconsciously swallowing a lump in his throat. Huh? Maybe telling him wasn't the best idea. Izuku shuddered, a nervous sweat breaking out on his brow. We go to the same school now, he admitted despite his reservations. She's doing well. Bakugo grit his teeth in irritation, brow hardening as he growled out, TCH, like I give a damn how a quitter like her is doing. That bitch is the last person I wanted to hear about Kakin, tell that quitter the next time you see her that she's a goddamn disappointment, Deku. Bakugo barked, stomping into the train. Izuku flinched, a pang of guilt causing his stomach to knot. Perhaps it would have been better left unsaid, but Izuku felt he needed to tell him despite that. That bitch up and quits. You go and get arrested for some dumb shit. You're both morons. Izuku didn't say another word, watching the train doors close as Bakugo refused to spare a single glance back at him. He continued to stare at the train as it departed, only looking away after he felt Morgana's paws tapping his shoulder. Who the heck was that? I don't think I've ever seen such an angry person before in my life. Well, at least from anything I remember, Morgana asked, his voice laced with annoyance. He was treating you like garbage, too. What's that guy's deal? That was Kakin, we grew up together. He used to bully me until we met Koto-san. For a while, we actually got along, until she moved away, Izuku explained, releasing a tired sigh. He went back to bullying me after that. Though to be honest, the way he acted was nothing like it was before. He actually seemed kind of concerned. That's how he expresses concern. I can't imagine what kind of a bully he was, Morgana muttered, grimacing as he looked back up at Izuku. Are you okay? Why yeah, it's just I wasn't expecting to see Kakin. Not like this, anyway, Izuku said, though his thoughts still lingered on Bakugo's somber state. Despite their differences, Izuku had full confidence in the idea that Bakugo would become the #1 hero one day. Still, as strange as it was to say, Bakugo's subdued belligerence was concerning. I hope things go well for you, Kakin. I can't try for it, but I know you'll be the greatest hero someday. Persona 5 Ost. My homie, holy crap, this place is effin' amazing. Ryuji hooted. As the final day of Golden Week approached, Izuku, Ryuji, Anne and Morgana still hidden inside of Izuku's bag started their long overdue celebration. Taking Anne's recommendation, the four had arrived at one of Tokyo's classiest hotel buffets. A rich assortment of food far too extravagant for the average high schooler to enjoy was theirs for the taking. Prize cuts of meat glistened under the glittering crystal chandeliers. Venerated itemi were laying out freshly made pieces of nigiri sushi, glazed to shine like polished jewels, on individual porcelain plates. The intoxicating aroma of handcrafted pastries, candies, chocolates, and cakes wafted through the aisles. Even their seats exuded decadence. Instead of individual chairs, the teens were given velvety satin sofas covered in gold leaf, the kind of furniture you would expect to see in an affluent mansion or villa. No one in the group had been in a restaurant like this before, at first feeling awkward as they seated themselves. But that soon passed as they collected their first plates, enjoying the random selection each of them picked out. Oh, this is incredible, I'd never find anything like this in town. Anne said through stuffed cheeks, skipping dinner and starting the meal off with a rich multi-layered chocolate cake. Hey, Miss Model. Shouldn't you be watching your calorie intake? Ryuji teased with a shit-eating grin, eliciting a glare from the twin-tailed blonde. Shut up and let me enjoy this. I could never afford sweets like this any other time. Anne retorted, digging her fork into her cake and shoveling it in her mouth. You're not much better, Ryuji. With all that meat, I'd feel greasy, Morgana pointed out, looking at the stack of juicy steaks, sizzling burgers, and fat sausages sitting in front of the punk. Then again, at least you don't eat like a bird. Izuku over here barely filled his plate. You do know this is a buffet, right? Anne and Ryuji peered down at Izuku's plate, immediately agreeing with Morgana's assessment. The green-haired teen had only picked out yakisoba, grilled chicken and mashed potatoes with a side of soup. As appetizing as they looked, it was a modestly made plate considering the grand selection available to him. Come on, man. Live a little. You could get any of those things just about anywhere, Ryuji encouraged, shaking his head at the plate in disappointment. I know, but there's so many things I've never tried before. It's kind of intimidating, Izuku admitted, flustered by the attention given to his food choices. That's why it's a buffet. Even if you leave some leftovers, it's no big deal. Try a bunch of stuff and find what you like, Anne suggested kindly, taking a spoonful of angel sponge cake she had sitting at the center of her dessert pile. Oh god, that's even better than the chocolate. Well, I agree, try not to be so narrow-viewed in your choices. Now come on, let's go and pick out my food. Morgana said, stuffing himself back into Izuku's bag. We'll pick out a new plate for you to feast on while we're at it. Shouldn't I at least finish what I got first? Izuku asked, looking down at his half-eaten plate. Dude, don't worry about it. They don't charge extra for stuff you don't finish here, Ryuji dismissed with a wave. See? It's fine. Now let's go. I'm starving watching these two pig out, Morgana urged, reaching a paw out and pushing on Izuku's arm. The green-haired teen sighed, setting his silverware down and picking up his bag up. He zipped the top closed but left the edge open for the cat to peer through. Now, to the fish dishes. You got to eat some already, so it's my turn first. If we're grabbing them at the same time, it might not matter which I pick first, Morgana-san, Izuku said with a sheepish chuckle, but nonetheless did as he was told. He picked up a plate and looked over the assortment of several grilled fish steaming inside silver platters. Barracuda, nurse shark, swordfish. He hadn't seen half of this stuff alive before, much less on a plate. They have sushi too. Do you want anything from the grilled fish? It all looks so good, Morgana purred in excitement. I prefer raw, but this is too much to pass up. Get me a small piece of each, and then we'll move on to the sushi. Izuku smiled at his enthusiasm, carefully picking out several cuts from each platter for the cat. Did you hear about the incident at the local high school? Apparently a coach recently came out as a sexual deviant. Izuku paused as he heard someone talking about Kamoshida yet again. He peered down the lane to find the source of the chatter. Two older patrons, a man and a woman, were casually gossiping about it as they picked out their food. Yes, it was quite the scandal. I heard that he came out and confessed in front of the entire school, too. How strange. Do you think he was influenced by a quirk? Possibly. But even if that's true, a lot of the students have already come out and confirmed his actions. There's no denying the truth of it now. This is just a distraction, though. The police and heroes should be focusing their efforts on solving the mental breakdown cases. Who knows what kind of villain is causing such a disturbance? Still, my sympathies go out to the Shujin students. I imagine it was quite disturbing to have an instructor like that in the school. Izuku had heard enough, picking at one last fish before moving onto the sushi table. He didn't want to say so, but he felt a shred of irritation at the way the woman dismissed the case so callously. Many students were hurt because of the ignorance of the police and heroes. People needed to know that it happened. Don't let it bother you too much, Izuku, Morgana spoke up, drawing the teen's attention down to the cat. Apparently Morgana was becoming adept at picking up on Izuku's emotional cues. What matters is that it's being talked about. Even if some people would like to ignore that it even happened. Why yeah, you're right. Sorry for worrying you, Izuku agreed, smiling apologetically despite being unable to look at the cat. Now let's get you some sushi. Yes. From there, Izuku stacked the plate with salmon and tuna nigiri, hoping to make it easier for Morgana to eat, as well as several rolls to add variety. With Morgana's plate picked out, Izuku moved on to his own. Not wanting to disappoint this time, Izuku selected several prime cuts of brisket, honey ham, and a single beef rib. Making sure to keep a balance in his palate, he added a small side of salad and spinach. Returning to the table, Izuku and Morgana nearly dropped the plates they were holding the moment they saw Ryuji and Anne. Apparently they had both decided to double down on their already enormous meals. Each of them had twice the amount food they had when Izuku left the table. Ryuji's plate looked like he had taken a quarter of each meat dish, and Anne's was a leaning tower of baked goods. How can you guys eat so much? Morgana asked incredulously, climbing out of Izuku's bag once the green-haired teen sat down. Can you even finish all of that? Yeah, of course. Ryuji exclaimed as he took another look at the mountain of meat before him. I think careful, you're starting to sound like Morgana. Anne teased, her words drawing looks of disgust from Morgana and Ryuji. Don't even say that. They both snapped, causing Anne to stifle a laugh, while Izuku failed to stop an amused smile from spreading across his lips. This is nice. I don't think I've ever sat around with friends like this. Even when he was on good terms with Bakugo, he was rarely able to sit around and chat with the kids who were accustomed to following the explosive blonde around. They often ignored Izuku's presence, and Bakugo was never one for idle chat. Makoto was 2 grades ahead of them, so she rarely joined them until classes were over. Realizing that his food was getting cold, Izuku pulled his thoughts out of the past and started to dig in. Thank you for the food. One bite of the brisket, made from perfectly aged A5 Wagyu beef, was all it took for him to realize the allure of such an exotic restaurant. It was unbelievably juicy and tender. He didn't even need to chew it to get it to slowly dissolve onto his tongue. The sweet marbled fat melded with the unending savoriness of the meat. Then he tasted the gentle seasonings, black peppercorns, Himalayan salt, cayenne pepper, and other spices he didn't recognize. Each added even more body and complexity to the already astoundingly delicious dish. It was unlike anything he'd ever eaten. So good, told ya. The meat is where it's at. Ryuji laughed, grinning ear to ear as he stuffed his mouth with another slab of meat. WOW. The tuna is to die for. Morgana quite literally purred, sparing no decency as he nibbled away at his plate. I doubt we'll get to enjoy this again anytime soon, so try to take it slow. Anne suggested. Like you're one to talk. Look at how much cake you've already shoveled down your throat. Ryuji once again teased, causing the twin-tailed blonde to stick her tongue out at him. This is truly a reward worthy of our efforts, Morgana said, licking some sticky rice off of his lips. Being phantom thieves certainly has its perks. Oh, speaking of which, have you guys seen the site made for us? Ryuji asked, setting his fork down as he began to fish into his pocket. Someone went and made a site just for the phantom thieves. What? Anne asked her, Izuku and Morgana drawing their attention up to Ryuji as he held his phone out. They leaned in, looking at a picaresque-styled forum. The Phantom Thief aficionado website. What exactly do people do on it? It's a forum for people to chat on. A lot of people post in on there are actually thanking us. Ain't that crazy? Ryuji asked with barely contained excitement. Anne took his phone, looking through the comments people left there. Thank you, Phantom Thieves. I finally had the courage to speak up because of what you did. You guys really saved us. I'm finally able to relax thanks to what you guys did. Thank you. A pleased smile edged across Anne's lips as she read the first set of comments on the list, her cheeks turning rosy as a feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment bubbled up in her chest. Wow, I don't know what to say. That's really cool. After all the rumors, I just thought that everyone assumed it was prank. Nope. It looks like some of the students were able to see us as real heroes. Nice to know, huh, Izuku? Morgana asked, a feline grin across his face as he looked up at the green-haired teen. Izuku was elated beyond belief, in fact. His eyes had already misted up, his lips trembling as he held back a sob of joy. Why yeah it is, he mumbled out, quickly trying to wipe any stray tears that escaped before he could stop himself. I get it. It feels pretty good to get thanked for that stuff, huh? Ryuji asked, sharing Izuku's feelings over the discovery. I was so focused on my own problems that I didn't realize we helped as many people as we did, Anne admitted, scrolling through the list of comments. This does feel good. Morgana tapped on Izuku's leg with a paw, drawing his attention to him. The cat raised a brow, looking between Anne and Ryuji silently as he tried to signal Izuku. This might be a good time, you know. Huh? Izuku said, taking a moment to realize what Morgana meant. The words he exchanged with Makoto echoing in his ears. Looking up at Ryuji and Anne, Izuku bit his bottom lip, unsure how to even begin to ask them. Hey guys, he began after a long pause, what if we kept being phantom thieves? That question immediately brought a stop to whatever Ryuji and Anne were doing, the two looking back at Izuku in surprise. Wait, really? You want to keep being a phantom thief? Anne asked, a small bit of disbelief in her expression. You know, I've actually been thinking the same thing, said Ryuji, the faux blonde now looking down in thought. I mean, look at how many people we helped. Being a pro hero never really occurred to me before, but after putting a stop to Kamoshida, it got me thinking well. I have to say I'm surprised to see you were thinking the same thing, Ryuji, Morgana chuckled, looking up at Izuku. I've wanted to suggest it for a while now, but I knew it wouldn't mean much until Kamoshida confessed. Izuku here admitted a few days ago that he had been thinking about it as well. After everything you've told me, that's not surprising, Ryuji smirked, reaching over and slapping Izuku on the shoulder. Guess great minds think alike, huh? Wait, is this really okay, though? It was one thing to take down Kamoshida, but will we really be able to help other people out like this? Anne asked, seeking some reassurance from the others. This was no small matter. After all, they're discussing whether or not they were going to continue being vigilantes. Legally, they'd be villains, no matter how much good they did. I've always hated shitty adults who were looking down on others the way Kamoshida did us. Out there, we'll probably find tons of people suffering like we did. Ryuji pointed out, leaning forward on the table as he spoke. We can stop that kinda stuff from going down. If we can get the name of the Phantom Thieves out there, there's no telling how many people we'll be able to help. I agree, Anne declared, looking up at the others with newfound resolve. I mean, with this kind of power, don't we have a responsibility to help? If I just ignored the problems of others just because they didn't involve me, I'll end up being no better than how I was before. I don't want to live like that. And Senpai Izuku muttered, his spirits rising as he saw that the four of them shared the desire to keep doing good. You're right. I still think the method is extreme, but as long as we're careful and only use it to help people, I'm okay with stealing people's hearts. Don't worry. So long as you're under my tutelage, I'll make sure we do things right. Morgana chuckled confidently, pushing up on his paws. One thing, though, we're going to have to keep fighting shadows, aren't we? Anne asked, her mind quickly going to the danger they faced in the palace. That's right. There's no avoiding that, sadly, Morgana said honestly. There's no doubt that going down this road will still be quite hazardous. You all need to be aware of the risks we will keep taking. You know, after everything we went through in the palace, I think we'll be just fine. So long as we stick together, Ryuji said confidently, sparing a grin at Izuku. You down to keep facing danger like that? If it means saving people, then I'm all for it. And with you guys there, I'll feel a lot more confident in our chances. Izuku agreed, the three now looking at Anne for her final word. My Hero Academia asked. You can become a hero. Well, I guess it's decided then, Anne declared, flashing a smile at the three. The phantom thieves will live on. Alright then. It's settled. Ryuji cheered, grinning like a kid in a candy store. It's time to show this world what we're made of. We can't be pro-heroes, but we'll save just as many people as any of them. Who let these children in the restaurant? The three paused in their celebration, looking back to see two adults looking down their noses at them. They certainly can't be regulars. I suppose they can't turn away customers nowadays. Even if they're rowdy children. Hey, what's your problem? Ryuji huffed, glaring at the adults. The couple simply turned a nose up at him, turning and walking away. The faux blonde clicked his tongue, resting back in his chair as he seethed in annoyance. Think we could start with snooty adults like them? Ryuji-senpai, we have to use our power against people hurting others like with Kamoshida. Not just on jerks who get on our nerves, Izuku quickly reminded him. They're not nice, but they're not criminals as far as we know. I know. Adults like that just tick me off, I guess Ryuji grumbled bitterly before sighing. Sorry, didn't mean to let it get me down like that. Back to business. We're officially the Phantom Thieves now. Keep it down. Morgana hissed as he shot Ryuji a disapproving glare. We want everyone to know who the Phantom Thieves are. We don't want them to know who we are. Right, I'll keep it in mind, the faux blonde responded half-heartedly. So, Izuku. You okay with leading us again? Anne asked, looking at the green-haired teen expectantly. You did a great job of it last time. I think we'll be unstoppable if we follow your lead like before. Really? Why you think I can keep doing it? Izuku asked in mild surprise. Yeah, dude. You were effing amazing when we were going through the castle. You've got my vote too. Ryuji reassured. I'd argue with them, but they're both right. You keep a surprisingly cool head under pressure and know how to draw out everyone's maximum potential. I have confidence in your ability to lead us as well, Morgana said, giving Izuku a smile. The green-haired teen looked at each of them in surprise, his cheeks flushing as he suddenly felt quite embarrassed. Oh okay, I'll do my best. There we have it. And now we're an official organization. I hope you guys are ready to be put through the ringer. You might just be fledglings now, but I'll get you all in shape. Fledglings, huh? That's definitely an accurate way to describe us. Anne chuckled. Oh, should we come up with an official name? I just went with Phantom Thieves of Hearts before because it was easy, but we should put a real title on our group now that we're making it official. Ryuji suggested. To be honest, I think Phantom Thieves of Hearts works well enough. I'm no good at naming stuff like that anyways, Izuku admitted, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. If you want to shorten it, we could also just call ourselves the Heart Thieves, Morgana helpfully suggested. But I don't think either title is particularly bad in this case. I'm cool with whatever. I'm no good at naming stuff either. Anne said, offering a pleasant smile. Phantom Thieves of Hearts is pretty straight to the point. Alright then. Let's raise a glass. To Anne and Morgana quickly hushed Ryuji, his volume stuck on high as usual. Oh, sorry. To the Phantom Thieves of Hearts. Let's teach the shitty people of the world hiding from heroes that they ain't safe. Anne rolled her eyes while Izuku simply laughed at Ryuji's enthusiasm, grabbing his cup and raising it as well. Anne soon followed suit, the three carefully clinking their glasses together. Toasting to a future as the Phantom Thieves of Hearts. Ah man, I went a little crazy at the end, there Ryuji groaned as he exited the bathroom. Izuku and Morgana waited for him by the door. There was really no need to start shoveling more meat after those first few plates you ate. You really are a special kind of moron, Morgana sighed, shaking his head in disappointment. You up yours, Ryuji huffed, lacking enough energy to formulate anything better than that. I can't believe they sectioned off the other bathrooms, though I almost hurled right there. We should hurry back to Anne-senpai. She's waiting for us downstairs, Izuku said, turning to lead them back to the elevator. As he rounded a corner, he was suddenly knocked back by a black-suited man, getting a faceful of shoulder. Ack. Hey. Ryuji blurted, catching Izuku as he fell back. Looking up, he saw that the black-suited man was part of a larger group, all of them surrounding a bald man with a goatee and shaded glasses. Hey, what's the big deal? Watch where you're walking, asshole. The man that bumped Izuku turned to look at the two, only for the bald man at center to grab his shoulder. We don't have time to deal with brats. Ignore them. Yes sir. Hey. Who are you calling brats? Ryuji snapped in irritation, but was stopped as Izuku grabbed his shoulder and shook his head. It's fine. I'm okay, Izuku said, trying to defuse the situation. This isn't worth getting worked up over. TCH still, though Ryuji growled, glaring up at the black-suited goons. HMPH. Since when did this hotel start running a daycare? The bald man sneered, he and his entourage quickly moving on. For Izuku though, hearing that man's voice for the second time overwhelmed him with a strange sense of familiarity. Where have I heard that voice before? You damned brat. I'll talk about a real squad of dicks, Ryuji spat, chewing on his bottom lip before looking at Izuku. Let's get out of here. I've had enough of this place. Why yeah. Okay, Izuku answered numbly, his eyes focused on the ground as he tried to recall the source of the memory. Are you okay? Did he bump into you that hard? Morgana asked in concern. I'm fine, just a migraine. Izuku insisted, rubbing his forehead. If you say so, dude. Let's get going. Hopefully Captain Doucher and his crew are already gone. Ryuji huffed, taking the lead this time to the elevator. Izuku didn't move for a moment, trying but failing to place the man's voice again. With a resigned sigh, Izuku let the thought go. It was almost like that guy from back then, but I'm not sure to be continued. This is the end of the video. If you enjoyed the story, then hit the like button and comment your favorite part, but for now see you all in the next video.